how much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was it was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're
Keeping it real.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell here between now and 1, and there's a lot to talk about this morning. There are problems in regard to Vladimir Putin. Should we be preparing a 72-hour survival kit as he plots a sabotage on our gas pipelines? And could they cause mass blackouts? Also, a secret war in the UK waters. We'll be getting into all of that with Simon Diggins and Mary Dejevsky, two of the best commentators on this, in just a second. But listen to this. The bill for rescuing MPs' pension funds, which is in trouble because they've invested in, guess what, woke funds, is likely to fall on taxpayers. There's been a huge swing in favour of ESG, environmental, social and governance. This is a significant cause of the poor performance. 862 million quid is gone from the pension fund for MPs. It missed its investment target by 25%. Who's going to pick up the tab? Guess what? You and me. Richard Tice is going to be in the studio later on. He's an MP. He'll be getting a pension. Should it be from there? Well, he's exposed all this and he's going to be talking to us a little bit later on. There's also really worrying figures about the true scale of kids' deadly weapons crimes across this country. We'll be talking about that with Peter Blexley. And Edinburgh University lecturers are trained on accent bias. Yes, they've been told to stop slagging off Scottish people. Tell us what you think about all these stories. As you know, it's my show, but it's your show too. And between now and 1 o'clock, I'm going to get as many people on the air as possible, whether that's a voice note, whether that's a phone call, or whether it's a message you're perhaps texting in. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, or use the main number to do one of 3 things. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. And the question we're asking today is, should taxpayers foot the bill to rescue the MP's pension fund? I'm going to give you all the details a little bit later on in the show, so stay with us here on Talk. And that is about taxpayers face footing the bill to rescue an £862 million pension fund for MPs and missed its investment target by 25%. It's jointly funded by MPs and the Treasury. It's fallen short of its expected returns over the past 5 years because it is overinvested, some say, in ethical funds. And guess who's going to have to make up the shortfall? You. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. I would imagine there are quite a few pensioners out there who are perhaps getting some sort of rise in their pensions, but their winter fuel allowance has been taken away. Well, we're going to talk about this a little bit later on. We'll also be reflecting on what various people have been saying, including Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and Kemi Badenoch is giving some interviews this morning as well. So we'll talk about that. But before all that, I want to talk about Putin's secret war in UK waters. This is a very, very worrying development, and the former MI6 boss says Britain needs to get ready for war as Putin is threatening Europe. Also, Russian censors are suspected of attempting to spy on the UK's nuclear submarines. They've been found hidden in the seas around Britain. The devices are believed to have been planted by Moscow to try to gather intelligence on Britain's 4 Vanguard submarines, the submarines that carry nuclear missiles. Well, let's talk to two of our best commentators of foreign affairs and defence issues, Simon Diggins, Colonel Simon Diggins, and Mary Dejevsky. Simon is obviously a former senior military officer. He's also an analyst of defence matters, and Mary is a columnist and former correspondent in Moscow. Good morning to you both. Simon, maybe I could start with you. How big do you think the threat actually is?
It's very serious, Peter. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
We know that the Russians, since even at the end of the Cold War, never quite gave up on their reconnaissance and intelligence gathering activities around then. But as the head of MI6 has said, and we've had these warnings now repeatedly now over nearly 2 years, the war in Ukraine has focused Russian attention and increased the threat to ourselves. And so what we've been seeing is this increasing activity, underwater surveillance, planting of sensors so they can record the movement of our submarines, including also potentially placing sort of standoff mines or mines very close to some of the key cables that underpin our infrastructure, not just our gas infrastructure, bringing gas in from Norway, but also, importantly, our data infrastructure that comes around. So the sense we've got is that Putin basically is preparing for conflict, or what he's doing at the moment, which is continual kind of grey zone hybrid operations, which is kind of the military term for this, where he puts under threat, there's pressure, there's a response, and he just keeps the whole thing unstable. So yeah, this is really serious and very important that the Navy are responding.
What do you make of this grey zone action, Mary? What is your analysis of this?
Well, as you might expect, I don't completely agree with the previous speaker, but I'm very, very wary and very hesitant about these sort of stories. I don't want to dash them down and say this is improbable, this doesn't happen. What I do think we need to do is to look at them a lot more carefully and ask certain questions like, when do these reports tend to appear? Are they actually reports about something that's happened now, this minute, or, as in the case of the submarine sensors, apparently, this is something that was actually discovered a little while ago, but lo and behold, now it's presented as part of the Great Russia threat, just as we may possibly be looking at the prospects for peace in Ukraine. Now, I think that the wider context and the juxtaposition of this has to be considered.
Let me go back to Simon just on that point. I'll come back to you in a second, Mary. I have one of my great phrases in life, Simon, is just because you're cynical doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. Is Mary wrong to be cynical?
No. I mean, where Mary is correct is that the timing of this particular announcement may be linked to some issues. I mean, be pretty clear, we want to have peace in Ukraine. I mean, there's no doubt about that whatsoever. This is not about sabotaging a sustainable, reasonable, just peace in Ukraine. I think it is highlighting, though, the extent to which the Russians are preparing for and looking for opportunities to exploit, to put pressure on us and everything that goes with that. So I'm afraid I don't share Mary's analysis. This is just a cynical exploitation of what's going on. I mean, clearly there is a timing issue about this, and the information that I see, I think we've both seen and shared the same report. It does give a huge amount of detail that we haven't previously had. Prior to this, we've had reports, for example, of the Royal Navy conducting monitoring, shadowing operations on Russian surveillance ships, particularly the Yantar, as it's been moving around. And that was often reported in real time. But it gave us no sense then of the whole context, the scale of which was going on. What this report does do, which is the Sunday Times at the moment, is give some sense of the scale. I think it's a very welcome report because it gives us a sense of what we're trying to do at the moment. But I don't agree with her that this is a sort of cynical opportunity to overturn a peace settlement. We want a just peace in Ukraine. Everybody wants a just peace.
I'm not sure Mary was quite saying that, but I just want to put this point to you, Mary, and let you respond to what Simon said as well. Sir Alex Younger, the former head of MI6, saying that the people in the UK must realise the threat from Russia and its China's closeness to the US is real. He says, I worry we have a disarmed military, self-evidently. We've largely dismantled our military and industrial base, which is a big problem. We've unforgivably launched a set of wars of choice which have imposed sacrifice needlessly in young people, and there's a great cynicism about this idea of collective effort to defend your country. Mary?
Well, I think an awful lot of that is right. Where I would dispute maybe is the bigger immediate conclusion that says that Russia is this colossal threat, specifically to the UK. You know, it seems to me that this is part of indeed an atmosphere that is being built up to try to convince us this is so. Now, as you suggested, I don't absolutely I don't subscribe to the idea that this is designed to sabotage any peace in Ukraine, but I would point out that when this subject was immediately broached, you heard all sorts of qualifications about this peace. I mean, to me, peace is when the weapons are stopped firing. And we've still got drones, we've still got bombs, we've still got air attacks from both sides. But to qualify the peace in talking about, you know, it's got to be just, it's got to be this, it's got to be sustainable, it's got to be that, it's got to be the other. And the Russians qualify it as well, because they're talking about a durable peace. But I think peace itself is the objective that should be in everybody's sights. And the moment people start qualifying it with so many adjectives, I think it drifts further and further away.
Is some peace better than a qualified peace in Ukraine, Simon?
Well, we could have a ceasefire tomorrow if Russia stopped attacking Ukraine. Let's be absolutely clear who the aggressor is. Okay, Ukraine is the victim. Russia attacked in February 22. They could have a ceasefire tomorrow. All they have to do is stop attacking Ukraine. Now, building a peace from there will be complicated, will be difficult from there, but that's the basis of that. So I'm afraid, I mean, this idea that it's going to be difficult to create a just peace, it will be, but basically we're dealing with a victim and an aggressor, and we need to be very, very clear, make a very moral distinction between those two. And I'm afraid that's my line.
Mary, in terms of what Russia now does, I mean, you accept, maybe you don't, that it is a threat to the UK, that if they are monitoring our nuclear submarines, that is something we need to be worried about. I just wonder whether you'll be packing your 72-hour survival kit.
Well, I'm very bad at these sort of things, and it's not because I'm dismissive of any threat from anybody.
You're just disorganised.
It's just because I can't quite get the enthusiasm up. I think if I had a family, if I was responsible for more people, then I might be more responsible in that respect. But as it is, I'm afraid I'm going to sit it out.
Talking about the 72-hour survival kit, Simon, is this just alarmism, do you think, or is there actually some merit in being prepared?
There's always merit to be prepared for any eventuality, and I think we may have lost a bit of that. I mean, we've all though remembered perhaps the kind of the survive to fight on the various things that came out earlier in the last instances of the Cold War, and it wasn't very effective. I think what it does tell you is perhaps that the fact that we are saying that the threat to Russia may affect actually how we live, and we've seen everything from, they're all plausibly deniable, but we've seen attacks on our cyber infrastructure, on information systems, the potential threat to gas pipelines. This has happened throughout other parts of Eastern Europe. We need to be prepared. We need to think now seriously about what national resilience means, and whether it be the kind of the headline figure of have a 72-hour survival kit packed for you, or more sensibly perhaps looking about all decisions we make about how we organise our lives, from even simple things like, so do we have our own steelworks? Do we have resilience in terms of the numbers of cyber cables we have? All those sorts of areas there. That's the key thing we need to be looking at ourselves. Can we survive as a nation? And that's the issue we've got at the moment. And I think the answer, and you heard Sir Alex Younger, a very sane, very sensible human being, talking about the way in which we have allowed not just our defence industrial complex and our defences to go, but even decisions around, I say, national resilience. Gas storage would be another thing that I would highlight. We've allowed it to disappear. And the net result of that is we are weaker as a result. So we are vulnerable. And my suspicion would be that Putin will keep a sort of era of grey zone hybrid warfare going for as long as he wants, because he can keep that going almost indefinitely, keeping us stirred up.
Just a final word from Mary, please.
Yes, I mean, you might be surprised to hear me say this, but I'm actually not opposed to reintroduction of national service in some sort of capacity. I think that first aid, medical capability ought to be something that's taught, whether in schools or on the edge of schools. But when that happens in other countries, specifically in countries like Russia, we tend to say that this is a sort of militaristic attitude to preparing the next generation. I don't think that is true.
Although almost any military person I've ever spoken to will say that they don't want conscripts. They don't want people who don't want to be there, Mary. They want people who really want to fight and really want to be part of our armed services.
Yes, and at the moment we have, as has been pointed out, we have a lack of such people, and I think there is an argument, if you're talking about national resilience, that this needs to apply to the population at large, not just to the people who are volunteering. And I understand that the military talks about needing absolute professionals, that the technology is at such a level that you only need people who are highly trained to do this. I think in terms of national morale and national unity and national effort, there is still a very good reason for having some sort of national service of some description, not necessarily military. National service in some description there, Simon. Rishi Sunak talked about this when he was trying to get people to vote for him previously. What do you make of it?
No, I agree with Mary. I think some kind of national service. It could be a mixture of military service. It could be what the Germans used to call Zivildienst, which was civil service, where people worked in hospitals and social care functions, but some system whereby people identify with and come together as part of that. I don't completely dismiss the issue of military service. There are levels of training you can give people which would support us in terms of having the sustainable force. We do need to rebuild our professional forces, but you're always looking, wars are always won by in the military phrase, by the second echelon. And I think that's what we need to be doing. So that's where the national service would come in.
Thank you both very much. Always great to talk to you either individually or together. Simon Diggins, defence analyst, Colonel Simon Diggins, and Mary Dejevsky, columnist and former correspondent in Moscow. Thank you for joining me this morning. Lots of people getting in touch. Tony says President Putin is preparing to invade the UK to fix the potholes, clean graffiti and pick up litter. I think his plans are perhaps a little bit bigger than that, and if he did that he'd be very popular. Mick in Wallington says living in London won't be so unbearable when Putin invades after surviving Starmer and Cannes. Hi Peter, another person says spying has been going on for centuries. It's just fact. Mary is right to be suspicious about the timing of the Russia story. There's been a drip of stories that we are heading for war for months. I'm far more concerned about our out of control government and elites. Tony says no need to worry about Russia because the pro-Ukrainian propaganda networks told us Russia had run out of weapons and munitions 18 months ago. You know the drill. Stuart says Starmer doesn't need any excuses like changing global circumstances to change his promises made before the election. He's a black belt super ninja at lying. Alex in Devon says, Peter, great show as usual. If you think we're not doing exactly the same to the Russians, you're living in La La Land. Britain is so-called intelligence is involved in just as much reciprocal disruption. Going by the state of the UK, what motive would the Russians have with a knackered old country with all these problems? Personally, I'd say it is liberation if Putin attacked, says Alex in Devon. Can't agree with you on that one, Alex. I'm afraid I do not want to live under Vladimir Putin. Thank you very much. Barry says, in the event of a conflict with Russia, we'll be lucky to last 72 seconds. Never mind 72 hours, says Barry, who is presumably not packing his kit. And Jeff says, what a shame the politicians' pension is short. Join the club. If they get theirs tweaked, then so should everyone's. This is the problem we have with power in the wrong hands, says Jeff. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on with Richard Tice, who'll be live in the studio. Exclusive interview with us this morning, and this is his piece in the Sunday Telegraph this morning, where he's talking about the bill for rescuing an MP's pension fund likely to fall on taxpayers. There's been a huge swing in favour of these ethical funds. I should say, speaking of MPs, we are not in any way neglecting the story that a Labour MP has been arrested on rape and child sex offences. I'm happy to talk about that because the police raided the home of Dan Norris, who's the Mayor of the West of England and the MP for North East Somerset. He's been arrested on suspicion of rape and child sex offences. He's a former minister, serving MP for North East Somerset. He was arrested and taken into custody after police raided his constituency home on Friday. He previously worked as a teacher and child protection officer. He's been immediately suspended from the Labour Party. They say Dan Norris MP was immediately suspended by the Labour Party upon being informed of his arrest. We cannot comment further while the police investigation is ongoing. It would be wrong for us to speculate. It would be wrong for us to say anything that's going to get you, who maybe ring in or text in, or me or this station in legal trouble about that. There is an investigation anyway, no charges yet, but certainly an investigation into Dan Norris, who I'm sure maintains his innocence. But just to be very clear, we're absolutely not neglecting that story. We're just being careful legally about it because we have to be. Steve says, good luck to Mary and Simon on their wish to see a form of national service. There are huge swathes of our massively expanded population who will simply refuse. I agree with you. Simon in Devon says, clearly the UK government does not consider Russia a threat to war, or they wouldn't be shutting down our steelworks and forging ahead with windmills and solar panels. We the people are not stupid. And spoiler alert, the UK are also spying on Putin's submarines. Again, we the people are not stupid. Have a great day. Personally, I'm quite glad we're spying on Putin's submarines. I think that's something we should be doing. I'm glad MI5 and MI6, presumably MI6 because they're the foreign ones, are doing that, because spying on Putin is a good thing as far as I'm concerned, because I don't want him anywhere near us. We're asking the question today, should taxpayers foot the bill to rescue the MP's pension fund? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're going to go to the debate desk next with Peter Barnes, who's a political strategist, and a new guest, Piers Pottinger, political commentator. Stay with us here on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle, because it's Meghan Sussex now.
Flynn has said, Samara, I agree with you all the time, but you're just boring.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, including Dawn in Chelmsford, who says, morning, Peter. The Russians are wasting their time spying on our nuclear subs. The last time they made a test firing, the missiles didn't work. A metaphor for the UK. Dawn, you're right, actually. I'd forgotten about that. Trevor in Harrow says, good morning, Peter. If we do introduce a national service, it will be fully DEI compliant. Also, white people will be barred. Will they be barred because of their white privilege? It's funny how white males aren't so bad when it comes to protecting the country, says Trevor. Very good point. Andy says, I would be amazed if Russia didn't know where all the subs are. great show. As for more troops, recruit more Gurkhas, they would fight for us. Doug says, when will our taxes be used correctly instead of paying for illegal immigrants, giving it away to other countries, bailing out Transport for London, the railways, the energy companies, the water companies, the government pension fund and the government's failing policies? This has to stop, says Doug. Well, we'll talk on the debate desk in a minute or two about that pension fund, because Richard Tice is going to be with us in about an hour's time with that story in the Telegraph today. Taxpayers footing the bill to rescue an £862 million pension fund for MPs after it missed its investment target by 25%. Our thoughts and prayers are with them, of course, because obviously no one else has suffered in the last few days. Speaking of which, tariffs were on the menu for a discussion with Darren Jones. Sadly, he doesn't have time to speak to us this morning. In fairness, he did speak to us a few weeks ago. But let's go over what he's been saying and what Kemi Badenoch's been saying with our debate desk panellists this morning. Peter Barnes, political strategist, is with us, as is the political commentator Piers Pottinger. You're both very, very welcome. Let's hear what Darren Jones has been telling Sky News on tariffs. This is Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. He is she is Rachel Reeves' deputy. We'll come back to that actually in just a second, but let me ask about tariffs more generally actually, Piers. How do you think this has played out in the last few days?
Well, very much as Trump would have wanted. And I mean, Keir Starmer has written in the Telegraph this morning that he's going to do everything to shelter British businesses from these tariffs. Well, I don't quite know what that means, and I rather fear he doesn't know either. And they keep talking about calm negotiations with Trump, which have obviously been going on for a long time. And in fact, under the previous government, trade negotiations with Trump in his first period went very well. Then Biden cancelled the prospective trade agreement. And now we're in a situation where we simply don't know what's going to happen. There's a
brilliant cartoon, the Matt cartoons in the Telegraph. I'm sure we can all appreciate this guy is a brilliant cartoonist, very, very funny. It's just a man watching the news, and it's the newscaster saying, "Good evening and welcome to What's Trump Done Now?"
Yeah, exactly. Well, at least at the weekend he plays golf. So not too much is going to happen, we hope, while he's doing that. But you never know with him. He could, an off-the-cuff remark. And
well, he did do some negotiation of the golf club recently. Peter, I'll come to you in a second, but let's see what Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Rachel Reeves' deputy, essentially, has been saying to Sky News on this tariffs issue.
Keir has been clear that he is unhappy about the tariffs and broadly unhappy about...
The President's got it wrong.
And broadly unhappy about, tariffs in what was a well-functioning global trading system. I suspect what's being referred to there is the fact that the United Kingdom had the lowest tariff and puts us in a much stronger position than other complex large economies, which we think was a vindication of our engagement with the United States in the run-up to the President's announcements. But clearly, we don't like tariffs. We're not happy about that. We're now negotiating this economic deal.
He didn't say the President had got it wrong, did he, Peter?
No, it's not bad media skills, I'll give him that. But I would like to remind him that it wasn't the lowest, it was the base rate. So realistically, what Keir Starmer, when all this kind of, cooing over the President and that weird hand on the shoulder thing, proved to be absolutely meaningless. The letter from the King proved absolutely meaningless. This was a fundamental failure by Keir Starmer and the Labour government to put Britain in a much better position because of these tariffs. Let's not forget other countries have actually got lower than the 10%. So, Darren Jones talks a good game, but the facts say something different. I completely agree with Piers. What Keir Starmer is going to do here, I don't know, because we're part of a global economy. So you can't shelter every business from every eventuality. He's going to have to kind of draw up some kind of plans. We're going to need some detail. But realistically, what Land Rover Jaguar, they've halted 6.5 billion worth of trade with the US, I think, as of last night. There's about 60 billion overall that we've traded with the US. So it's not small figures and it's not small change.
Canada is fascinating. No one's ever said that before. Canada is fascinating because I was speaking to a Canadian yesterday, actually. He was telling me that there is actually rotting American food in Canadian supermarkets. There are people who are refusing to buy American food. She even told me that an Americano is now called like a Canadicano because they're, it sort of reminds me of freedom fries back in the days of the Iraq War. And really there is this hostility, some would argue, between Canada and America. I wonder if that's going to come into this country, Piers.
I think that's inevitable, quite frankly. And also, I mean, people here don't want to eat chlorinated chicken and beef packed with hormones.
I mean, in fairness, Keir Starmer says that's not going to happen because it was part of a trade deal.
Yeah, but he's said a lot of things are not going to happen, then they happen. I mean, basically, this government's completely out of control in almost everything we look at. And unfortunately for them, Trump has made the situation much worse. And he's playing a rather expensive, dramatic and quite frightening game with the world. And that is what is really worrying. At the meantime, the Ukraine war continues unabated. The Russians are killing more Ukrainians every minute of the day. And that seems, the talks there seem to have shuddered to a halt.
They seem to have stalled, certainly.
You know, we've also got the catastrophe in Myanmar that no one has really paid proper attention to, in my view, because it really is a catastrophe. And here in the UK, in every department, there's a massive problem, and the pensions for the MPs that you mentioned at the start of this is just one example, and no one has much sympathy for them because we've got so many other problems.
Well, exactly. Why should they be bailed out? A number of people would say.
I mean, if you lived in Birmingham, your priority would be seeing the rubbish.
Well, exactly. We talked about that yesterday in the programme, and it is a disgrace. We talked to a number of people in Birmingham. And if you're in Birmingham and your rubbish is piling up, give us a call and let us know what the picture is. 0344 499 1000. Darren Jones also spoke on Sky News about a Labour Party poster which compares Farage and Badenoch, Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch. Very, very interesting thoughts, I think, from him. We're going to hear what Kemi Badenoch thinks as well on this. But first of all, let's hear what Darren Jones has been saying about this poster. We're in election period. There are local elections in many parts of England coming up in less than a month. Clearly, Labour want to make it clear in their view that Reform and the Conservatives are one and the same. I know a lot of our viewers and listeners simply don't agree with that. But let's hear what Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, said about that.
I think that the overlay of...
Oh, we just had a problem with that clip, but the system has crashed apparently, so there we are. But we got a couple of seconds. I saw a picture of it as well, the sort of overlay really of Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch there. We get the principle. Anyway, we've seen this before with William Hague. Do you remember all the hair, the Maggie Thatcher hair and so on? What do you make of this as a strategy, as a plan?
To be honest, it's something that they've got to do. It's not a bad idea realistically, but is it going to work? Probably not. Let's be real. Most people don't vote in local elections. It's about an 18% turnout overall, roughly. So yeah, I have to admit it is interesting how the Labour Party, campaign-wise, over the last...
It's also got nothing to do with local government.
Nothing at all. But
these are not local politicians, these are national politicians.
Don't even get me started on that one. But it's interesting, campaign strategy-wise, the way the Labour Party have gone dirty early, continually at multiple elections, is actually quite interesting, and then they've kind of pulled back as the closer that you get to the election itself. It's quite an interesting strategy to be able to get everybody riled up and then kind of seem like the sensible person in the room while everybody else kind of catches up to you. It's not a bad idea. It's a bit of an American trick, but I don't know how well it really plays over here, because realistically the Labour Party have got to do something. They've got their lowest polling ratings.
You're a political strategist. Is it a political strategy you would advocate?
Given how badly the situation is for the Labour Party, they've just got to throw some mud and hope it sticks. Because, like I said, Keir Starmer's the most unpopular Prime Minister. You've got economic chaos, you've got the tariffs, you've got jobs, let's not forget, whilst all this tariff stuff is going on, Rachel Reeves was more than capable of messing up the economy on her own than she ever needed Trump's help. So there's lots of things that the Labour Party
I want to go to Piers in just a second, but let's see if we can hear that clip from Darren Jones speaking on Sky News about this poster, basically overlaying a mashup of Farage and Badenoch. Let's see if it works.
I think that the overlay of these two people's faces seems to me unpleasant.
Why?
It just seems unpleasant to me. You think this is okay?
I think what it's showing is that you've got Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Reform Party and the leader of the Conservatives, who essentially are one and the same thing. They're having these arguments on the right of British...
saying Farage and Badenoch are the same thing?
They're fighting in the same space on the populist right. I mean, I think that's pretty clear.
It's quite a weird poster. Kemi Badenoch's been speaking on Sky as well. I don't know why Darren Jones doesn't know how to pronounce her name. It's Badenoch rather than Badenoch, which some people still seem to get wrong. It's Badenoch, not Badenoch. And Kemi Badenoch, speaking on Sky News, she was asked about this particular thing, and Farage, the Farage and Badenoch mash-up, and this is what she had to say.
I mean, look at that. It doesn't make any sense.
Says no difference between you and Reform.
I think even just looking at that picture shows that they're trying to make an argument that doesn't work. Of course, there are huge differences between us and Reform. If there weren't, there wouldn't be a Reform party. What I'm saying now is that we need to make sure that local people understand that what they are voting for now is not an opinion poll, but who's going to run their services. And if they vote for anything other than Conservative, they could end up like Birmingham, where there are rats running around and rubbish piling up in the streets.
Okay. Piers Pottinger, what do you make of what Kemi Badenoch said there on Sky News?
Well, yes, I mean, she's right. But, I mean, the poster is ludicrous and will have no impact, in my view. I was involved with a very famous poster some time ago, which is more relevant now than perhaps it was then, called Labour Isn't Working. And that's
one of the most famous posters in British political history.
And that was actually my partner, Tim Bell, the late, great Tim Bell. And he produced this with Charles Saatchi and Maurice Saatchi and Charles, and it was a great success. But, I mean, doing something like that isn't going to make any difference at all, in my view, and particularly when we all know Reform are going to absolutely sweep the board at the local elections, because sadly, Kemi, I mean, it's good to see her finally appearing somewhere, because she's having so little impact on the electorate.
I saw her in a high visibility jacket on the building side a couple of weeks ago. I thought, gosh, she's finally got out of London. Yeah, very, very interesting. We're going to talk more about what she has to say. Sorry, Peter, you had a thought.
No, I was just going to chime in there. Well, whilst people say that she's not got much media presence, the Conservatives haven't just disappeared in terms of their polling. They've topped the polls in multiple different ones. They're holding steady with the rest of them. So this idea that they're going to get wiped out and all the rest of it does seem a little bit hyperbolic. But
well, it's interesting if you look at, I mean, not to get too cone-headed about that, but this is kind of my job. Yeah. You know, the councillors who were elected the last time, that was sort of the high point of Boris mania. So they're probably going to lose a lot anyway. Listen, we'll return to this in just a second. We've got a break, otherwise I don't get paid. But we'll come back to the debate desk with Peter and indeed with Piers in just a second here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Kemi Badenoch spoke to this station a few days ago, but she's been speaking to Sky News this morning, and one of the stories we talked about quite a lot actually over the last couple of days, I was on a drive on Friday between 4 and 7, yesterday as well, is this abortion clinic buffer zone story. This is a woman who breached that buffer zone 150 metres around an abortion clinic, and she went into it, she held a sign saying here to talk, or words to that effect. She breached that, she then refused to pay her fine, it went to court, she's been convicted convicted of that. And Kemi Badenoch has spoken to Sky News about that particular controversy as well.
The reason why it was not a whip vote is because it had to do with abortion, which is a free vote. Once anything has to do with abortion in Parliament, it tends to be a free vote. But Parliament made that decision. That was the law. I think that on the balance of probabilities, it's probably too strict. I also think that we need to be careful about creating a situation where some citizens are able to deliberately harass others in sensitive situations. I think that people should be free to express their opinions. Freedom of speech is one of those values that was brought in to make sure that governments did not impose themselves on individuals.
Peter, what do you make of this controversy?
I think it's really, really important. I think it strikes to a very fundamental core. I don't think it was brought in. I think it is the very basis of liberal society. It's the right to criticise. And I do think that we are seeing a very real attack on free speech, not necessarily deliberately by the government, but also by society itself. I think we're seeing it, whether it be in the corporate world, the entertainment world, or wherever. Free speech is being slowly eroded away, and it's being done on the basis of protecting others. You have no right to live your life without free of being offended. You just don't. And unfortunately, some people just need to kind of grow a little bit of a spine and realise that not everybody's going to like what they say.
If you're going in for an abortion, it's not about growing a spine.
Well, I'm sorry, I have to disagree there, because I don't think you can keep doing this. Well, it's that situation, it's that situation. You either believe in freedom of speech or you don't. There's no kind of in or out of this situation. And
why not have your freedom of speech 151 metres away?
Why not 152? Why not 163? Why do we always have to keep putting parameters on freedom of speech? It's either you have it or you don't.
Piers?
Well, I think the law was not actually about freedom of speech. It was about, and the buffer zone was created to protect the people in the environment from much bigger demonstrations. For some ridiculous reason, this woman was who was deliberately breaking the law and seeking publicity. She's now been given a far bigger platform for her views than she would have had if they had just let her stand there quietly. She wanted to be arrested. It was a deliberate way of gaining publicity, was to break the law, refuse to pay the fine, and get as much coverage as possible. So whilst I'm a great believer, passionate believer in free speech, I think on this particular incident was a deliberate law-breaking attempt to gather support, which I don't support. I don't support anyone breaking the law. Equally, I think the police are focusing far too much on non-crime hate incidents. I mean,
this wasn't one of those, but certainly that's
it kind of falls into that category, and we're now getting the police spending all this time, and more every time Yvette Cooper opens her mouth, she said, we're going to enforce this, or we're going to enforce this. How? They can't enforce basic laws as we speak.
Including particularly, I love all this stuff on cigarettes as well, and telling people to stop.
How are they going to enforce it?
How about enforcing not smoking cannabis, which I think most of us have experienced walking down the street smelling someone doing that, which is illegal, but not that you would know it. Edinburgh University lecturers have been trained on accent bias. I want to talk about this story because just take us through this, Peter. What's been happening?
Yeah, so basically there has been a series of anti-Scottish bullying within Edinburgh University, which I find quite an interesting situation. There's and what they brought in is this kind of bias training for the academic staff. It's currently voluntary, but 500 members of staff have already gone through it. So I imagine it's going to be a compulsory thing eventually, given the state of universities these days. But it is interesting that there was the accent bias report about kind of how people from outside of London or have a more regional based accent, or even a more international accent, people with Indian accents in general, they report a very high level of discrimination. They basically I was saying that, you know, if you don't have the kind of university accent or the kind of standard London rather posh accent, for want of a better phrase, then you will be discriminated against. Now, what the report does go into say, which I did find quite interesting, is that when you listen to the content of what a person says, the bias disappears. So it is the kind of stereotypical ideas about where a person comes from is holding them back. So I do think this is important. As a guy from the north of England, you know, it has been commented on that I have a weird accent, but yeah, I think this is important. But I do wonder how much money this is costing Edinburgh, and I would like to see some kind of results You know, is there any specific cases of people reporting this bias, or is it just, oh, I feel this way? You know, I need some specifics. I need some grounding in facts.
And nobody has the right not to be offended. Piers?
Well, I mean, I am from Edinburgh and I am Scottish. I know I don't sound it. And when I went to school in England from Scotland, I did have a strong Scottish accent.
Right.
And I was called Jock, and a lot of banter went on. I wouldn't describe it as bullying. It was all in a very light-hearted spirit, really. And that's the way I took it. And I don't see anything wrong. People are always going to have different accents. And again, this is not completely crazy. And the story headline actually says university lecturers are being told about this. Well, they're not the ones. It's students amongst each other, young people together.
They could stop it and say, you know, if they're doing it in the lectures or something.
It's always going to happen. I mean, it's human nature, and also some of it is just is actually part of growing up. You've got to learn about it. And I think
you hit the nail on the
trying
head.
to regulate this and spend money and inquiries and so it's absolute nonsense.
As the most regional person in this conversation, I can say that Jeremy Kyle ribs me about my accent usually 3 or 4 times a week, and it's part of his affection for me. Maybe it isn't, but actually I remember being told, and I think it's actually part of the great British character as well, just to slightly take a hand out of people. And also I would say that my accent and my voice has been one of the best things for my career, probably. It's probably helped me as the pound shop Eamon Holmes, and that has helped me do that.
I think it's the context. I think, like you said, it's all about how it's said. If it is done to harass and intimidate, that's very different than somebody with a bit of banter. And that's the problem with the word bullying.
If it is to harass and intimidate, that's something very different, as you say, and that is bullying, and that shouldn't happen, and that's very clear. And you don't need, I would argue, training to say, whether you're bullying someone on their appearance, on something about what they do or how they walk or how they speak or whatever, it's all the same. Whereas the accent training in general, and I just wonder if it sort of takes away some of the British character and some of the British banter.
I remember when Anne Robinson was arrested for making a joke about the Welsh.
What's the point of the Welsh, she said,
yes. And accused of racism. Well, I mean, if people were going to be arrested for making jokes about the Welsh, most of England would be behind bars.
Well,
it's absurd.
I also must point out that it goes the other way as well. The people with regional accents take the mickey out of people with rather stereotypically London accents. It goes both ways.
Absolutely.
It's always interesting how that's never brought up in
It's very true. Listen, thank you both very much. We're going to continue with this discussion on the debate desk. Whatever your accent is, wherever you are in the UK or indeed abroad, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think about what Piers and Peter are talking about. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week, the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
Here goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello, lady. Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just on the accent bias story, we're going to talk to Chris McGovern, who's the chairman for the Campaign for Real Education, a little bit later on. What do you think about that? Have you been slagged off because of your accent? Do you think people should receive training to not slag people off because of their accent or criticise them? Or is it just a bit of banter? Or do you hate the word banter? I know people who hate that word and just say, actually, that covers all sorts of crimes and you can't say anything these days. We'll talk as well about free speech now, because the mother jailed for the Southport Twitter post should be freed. That is what Liz Truss has said. This is a very interesting one. This is a woman, Lucy Connolly, who was tweeting about Southport, and at the time she spoke about mass deportations, setting fire to asylum hotels. For all I care is what she said. I feel physically sick knowing these Southport families, knowing what these Southport families will now have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it. She took her post down within 4 hours after thinking better of what she had written in the heat of the moment, but not before it had been viewed about 310,000 times. Screenshots had been taken. She was interviewed by police on the 6th of August and charged 3 days later. Well, Steve's been in touch about this and says Lucy Connolly, which is her name, is yet another politically targeted prisoner jailed by a judge after both Starmer and Cooper, Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, had already branded everyone as far right and criminals who would face the full force of the law. And if you think these cases are bad, just wait until Angela Rayner shoves through her Islamophobia legislation, says Steve. It should be said that Lucy Connolly she's seeking to appeal her sentence on the basis that the trial judge made a mistake. She argues over categorising the severity of her crime, failing to give, she alleges, sufficient weight to her mitigating circumstances, including her emotional sensitivity to children's deaths. She lost her 19-month-old son in a hospital blunder. Peter, you were talking about free speech earlier on. What do you make of this?
I think her comments were ridiculous, of course, ridiculous comments. But, you know, again, this is my big problem. When you start infringing on the fundamental basis of free speech, where do you keep drawing the line? Because the line moves again and again and again. It's one of those things they say, like, well, this one it clearly is. But the problem is that becomes the basis of an expansion. But what's really important to note is that Lucy Connolly is not the only person who was done for social media posts throughout that period. There were over 1,000 arrests made by the police over the period of the riots, and 300 people were convicted. So she's not like a singular martyr, but it's important to note that, you know, this is up 58% from 2019. These kind of social media crimes, as they were. But yeah, I am very, very concerned about this. What I do find quite irritating about the story in particular is that Liz Truss, Suella Braverman and Bob Blackman all coming out saying this is terrible. Well, where were they when they were in government making sure that this stuff doesn't happen? They sat back and watched the erosion of our freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and at times voted to make it happen. So I find this really irritating. A lot of Conservatives are doing it now, this rewriting of history, saying, oh, isn't it all terrible, when they did nothing in government to prevent any of this. It is absolutely irksome. But I do think there is some real problem with Keir Starmer's comments about labelling everybody far right and Yvette Cooper and the way that the government really hammered home that narrative pretty hard. I think that is a big, big problem that we definitely need to talk about. But overall, I think
if someone is going online advocating, for example, that an asylum hotel be firebombed, that is an incitement. But what she was doing in this, she's saying mass deportations and setting fire to asylum hotels, for all I care. There's a nuance there, isn't there? It's not nice. It's not a nice thing. I wouldn't put it out there. I'm not advocating anybody should put it out there. I think it's a nasty thing. She took it down after thinking better of what she had written. But, I mean, what do you make of this, Piers?
Well, I think what I make of it is that the sentence didn't fit the crime. I think there's no point putting a perfectly ordinary housewife who, in the spur of the moment and out of absolute frustration and anger, said some unfortunate things, and they weren't nice and they were wrong. but it doesn't equate to a 31-month jail sentence, particularly when the jails are full. And also we've got a huge number of criminals out there, real criminals, who should be arrested and put in prison instead of this woman. I think it's gone too far. But equally, you know, you have on the left, you touched upon it there, on the left, they accuse everyone of being a fascist who doesn't agree with their views. And it's becoming very polarising, and it is dangerous because the more we get this kind of situation, the more polarising it is.
I agree with you,
and
Piers.
it doesn't help.
I agree with you, Piers, and I think there is an erosion of the meaning of language when we reach for things. We call people fascists, we call people Nazis, we talk about genocide when those things aren't true, and actually it minimises what a Nazi actually was.
Exactly.
It minimises what fascists actually are, and it minimises things like genocide, all of which are horrendous. And simply to go to that end point immediately is something that I think both the left and the right are guilty of this.
I think so, very much so. And I'm afraid, as Peter was hinting at, I think a lot of this goes back to David Cameron and George Osborne, who I'm afraid became very woke and were very have a lot to blame for sowing the seeds of this explosion of wokery that we're now seeing the backlash against. You know, Trump is the epitome of backlash against wokery, and some aspects of what he's doing are not pleasant. But here in this country, we're still at the stage where anyone who is at all right of centre is immediately accused of all these terrible terms, which are completely
although it's
wrong.
interesting, even the term woke, I have a lefty friend, yes I do have some of them, who said to me, he just, you know, the joke that he has with me is he says, right Peter, what's woke this week? You know, he sort of says you can't just call everything woke.
Yeah, no, it is fair, and I find the anti-woke lot just as irritating as the pro-woke lot. But I do think it's very interesting, though, when you talk about people being labelled racist straight away, isn't it interesting how context is also only applied to the left-wing protests? So, for example, the Metropolitan Police came out and said, oh, the flying the Nazi flag was within context. The phrase from the river to the sea had to be put into context, yet everybody who was anywhere near any of these so-called riots was immediately a far-right thug. It just seemed to be that one side gets all the blame and the other side seems to be excused away. This is why I say that it's not just kind of in the political one, it's in every aspect of our society now that we're starting to see this kind of two-tier, you know, whether you really two-tier justice or like two-tier treatment, whatever you wanted to call it, or it is very clear that one group gets 1% of rules and the other group gets another. It's again and again and again, and we're seeing it, and it is very problematic because it's, you know, a great way to divide societies and bring them all down.
Peter and Piers, thank you both very much for joining me on the debate desk today. That's Peter Barnes, who's a political strategist, and Piers Pottinger, a political commentator. Appreciate you joining me today. And Doug has been in touch and says, so if we follow Rachel Thieves' proposed ISA investment into stocks and shares and we make a loss due to government policies, will the government make up the shortfall? That's the story we're going to be talking about with Richard Tice, who is coming up very soon. Actually, he is the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, and he has a story today about the bill for rescuing MPs' pensions funds likely to fall on the taxpayer. It's an £862 million pension fund, and I want to ask you today, should taxpayers foot that bill? Should taxpayers foot the bill to rescue the MP's pension fund? Many of our pension funds have had quite the hit in the last few days because of Trump's tariffs. Some would say that's a market adjustment and it'll all be fine as time goes on. Certainly that's what Donald Trump would say. What do you think? Should taxpayers foot the bill to rescue MP's pension fund? We will, as I say, be talking to Richard Tice live in the studio exclusively about that. We'll also talk about Lucy Connolly more in a second, because the mother jailed for that Southport Twitter post should be freed. That is according to 3 senior MPs, Bob Blackman, Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, and Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary. They say she should be freed. What do you think about that? Let me know your thoughts on that, on accents, on whether you're preparing a 72-hour survival kit as Putin is monitoring our submarines. Whatever you think, let me know. 0344 499 1000. Plenty more to come here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's loads to talk about this morning, and you can get your voice on the air, but give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls before too long. The mother jailed for the Southport Twitter post should be freed. That is according to the former Prime Minister Liz Truss and Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, and Bob Blackman as well, a senior Conservative MP. What do you think? We'll get all the details of what she said. We'll talk to Gawain Tyler and Andrew Tettenborn about that in a second. Also, we're asking the question about whether you think taxpayers should foot the bill to rescue the MP's pension fund. Richard Tice is going to be here in this studio in just a few minutes' time because he has revealed that taxpayers face footing the bill to rescue an £862 million pension fund for MPs. It's missed its investment target by 25%. Why? Because they're investing in woke funds. ESG, that's the thing, that's the key word in all of this: environmental, social and governance investments. They've said there should be ethical funds. That's fair enough, but the money hasn't happened. What's going to happen with the shortfall? I don't know about you, but my pension's gone down. I was talking to someone last night who's lost $9,500 from his pension, and we're in a situation where many people will be suffering because of the tariffs and the general economic gloom that is happening. So what should happen in regard to the MP's pensions? Richard Tice is going to illustrate it. I want to hear from you as well. 0344 499 1000. We're also talking about accents and whether people at Edinburgh University should be given training not to slag off the Scottish people who are there. Yes, really. Lots to discuss. Stay with us and give me a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please, whatever your thoughts are. It can be as short or as long as you like, as long as it's not more than a minute. 0344 499 1000. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message on that number, or you can give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to talk about here on Talk between now and 1. Stay with us. Well, as I say, Richard Tice will be with us before too long. He is the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, and we're going to talk about that story about MPs' pensions, and also Putin, his secret war in UK waters. Should we be preparing a 72-hour survival kit? He is plotting to sabotage our gas pipelines and cause mass blackouts, we're being told. What do you think about that? Let us know. Now then, let's talk about Lucy Connolly. She is the mother who was jailed for a post on Twitter. The former Prime Minister Liz Truss says she should be freed. She was given a 31-month sentence imposed. She's a childminder from Northampton. She claims it was excessive, claims she was the victim of a politicised two-tier justice system. She's backed, as I say, by Liz Truss, Bob Blackman, who's chairman of the 1922 committee, the committee of backbench Conservative MPs, and also we have Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, who says, now let's just be clear about what she said. I'm not going to read out the actual words because it's 11 o'clock in the morning and some of the words she said shouldn't be read out at this time. Mass deportation now, set fire to the effing hotels full of the bees for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them. I feel physically sick knowing what these families will now have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it, said Lucy Connolly. Now, she took the post down within 4 hours. She thought better of what she had written in the heat of the moment, but not before it had been viewed 310,000 times, and screenshots, of course, had been taken. She was interviewed by police on the 6th of August and charged 3 days later. Gawain Tyler is Westminster Communications veteran, former advisor to Nigel Farage, joins me now, as does Andrew Tettenborn, the writer and academic. Gawain, should Lucy Connolly be in prison?
No. She just shouldn't be.
Why?
Because apart from the else, she's spent a long time there already. She's applied for leave to see her children, her disabled child, and not only was she not given bail like many others. I mean, we have currently somebody being charged, a politician being charged with the most heinous crimes. She just
well, I think you might be referring to Dan Norris, and we need to be careful because he hasn't been charged with anything yet, and I'm sure he denies the allegations against him.
the allegations been made against him. But the point is, you have that Labour councillor who's still not been put through courts, who was calling for the slitting of throats of people in front of a crowd of very, very angry people, who was whipping up that.
Should he be jailed, in your opinion?
Somebody who had lost her own child.
Should that person who advocated for the slitting of throats be jailed?
He has to go through court. I'm not 100% sure whether he should be jailed, but I do think he should have gone through the system at speeds as she was.
I mean, there will be people go in who would
she
say
had lost a child, and all the mitigation.
There will be people go in who would say, if there was a Muslim, for example, who said that churches should be firebombed, that person should go to prison.
I would. Again, context. You were talking about context earlier. The context of this was not taken into account in any way. If this Muslim person was saying that because say a Welsh choir boy, a real one, had murdered some Muslim children at an iftar feast, then yes, perhaps. But that wasn't the case in this instance. It just wasn't. And we are supposed to take context into account. She was advised to plead guilty. She should not have done. And because she took that advice, because she was told she'd be out by Christmas to see her child, she did that. And then the biggest book possible was thrown at her head. Okay. She's not been allowed out on leave. Other people with far more heinous crimes are out on leave. By now, yes, she should be out.
Well, let me ask those two questions to Andrew Tettenborn. Andrew, first of all, should she have been imprisoned? And second of all, should the sentence be 31 months?
Well, the first one, I rather doubt whether she should be imprisoned. There was a lot of mitigation there. I have a feeling she may have been advised to plead guilty by a board, well, not a board, but a slightly blasé duty solicitor.
Well, we don't know who advised her, so we want to be careful about that, obviously, Andrew. But she did plead guilty.
That the advice to plead guilty was remarkably doubtful.
Okay.
I think she was very much the wrong person at the wrong time. She was seen by many people in the justice system as a person to be made an example of. As Alison Pearson said yesterday, this wasn't a case of orders given from on high. This was, I think, just a general agreement that there had to be the book thrown at people who said things that were out of turn during the Southport riots. As to whether she should be in prison for 2.5 years, most certainly not. I think there were gasps in court when she went down to that period, for after all, a tweet that was taken down within 4 hours. There's also something else which rather stinks about this, which is that when she applied for leave to go home and see her children, there certainly is evidence of an internal communication saying, better not, the publicity would be awful if we did. Now, that seems to me to be very, very doubtful. It seems to me something that ought to be investigated.
Gawain, do you think...
I can't but agree with Andrew there, 100%.
Okay. In terms of Twitter itself, I mean, we're all publishers. We're all people who can go on Twitter if you have a phone, if you have access to the internet, which the vast majority of people do. We can all be self-publishers. At what stage do you think the law should kick in regard to what people say online, Gawain?
Personally, I think that the fact is her tweet could be seen as incitement. It could, particularly in the heated moments of the time. Yes, I think there is some level of punishment required, but whether it's 31 months is a different ballgame. It's the sort of bound over to keep the peace stuff rather than anything more than that. We do have laws on incitement and we should stick with them, but I do think that we have to take personal responsibility for that which we do. And I think that she was absolutely willing to take personal responsibility for something that she knew was wrong, so much so that she deleted it only 4 hours later. Of the 310,000 views, I think most of them took place not from her tweet, but from screenshots of her tweet publicised by other people. So I think that's probably overstating the case as well. But as Andrew said, the amount of mitigation in this case, the good character that was ignored, the personal situation that was completely ignored. This was an act by an angry state against a reasonable and decent woman who had made a mistake. And I think that when you talk about taking responsibility for that which we tweet, of course we have to. That is part of who we are as a nation, as a people. We take responsibility for our actions. She was prepared to do so, but the state wanted not just its pound of flesh, but it wanted...
Well, they would argue it was an independent judiciary, but Andrew, I wonder what you think about that particular point in terms of the context of the time and the fact that the Keir Starmer certainly arranged and pushed for very swift justice for anyone at that time, that particularly bad time in our island story, when we were told, when so many people were reacting very, very angrily during the riots.
Well, I don't mind swift justice. What I object to is draconian justice like this. And there is actually one slightly troubling feature about the trial. She was advised to plead guilty to making the tweet intending, as far as I remember, to stir up racial hatred, which is quite a serious offence. Much more serious than making a tweet which is likely to stir up racial hatred. Now, my own feeling is that if I were a judge, I would say that the evidence of that intent was actually rather weak, and that therefore, for that reason as well, this should have fallen towards the bottom of the sentence.
But if she pleaded guilty to that, what was the judge meant to do?
Well, the judge has a discretion in sentencing, and the judge can say, well, okay, you pleaded guilty, but it seems to me the indications of intent to raise racial hatred are actually rather weak. I'm not going to take a great deal of account of that. And were he to do that, it would be interesting to see whether the Crown tried an appeal against leniency. If it did, I think it might find itself in some difficulty.
Gawain, what would happen now, do you think, if someone sent a similar tweet today?
I fear something similar would happen. I just want to follow up something. Yes, the intent to create racial hatred, but she had just as much intent to create hatred against the political class in that tweet.
Yeah, but that's not a specific offence, I suppose.
Agreed, but I think the fact that she broadened it, she was slightly, obviously angry, but she broadened it. The whole, as Andrew is, again, I agree with Andrew, the whole tweet itself seems to be obviously a moment of rage rather than a moment of consideration. Okay. And the way it's been handled today, I suspect the same thing would happen. And the problem is, do you remember there were the London riots, with bits of Croydon burnt down and all the rest of it?
Of course,
The first thing the government did was to say, we must understand why people rioted. Yeah. In this instance, within seconds, the Prime Minister, knowing stuff we didn't know and denying stuff we didn't know, said they're all far-right thugs. He had prejudiced every single case by saying that. Okay. There was no consideration of why people kicked off, just they must be punished. Yeah, and that wasn't the case for other people who riot.
Well, I can't, obviously, and I'm sure you're not condemning, or condoning, I should say, any violence, Gawain, but
no,
the context of that
just the two-tier justice aspect.
Okay, Gawain Tyler, who is a former advisor to Nigel Farage, and Andrew Tettenborn, writer and academic, thank you both very much for joining me on this topic. What do you think of what they have said? What do you think of what Gawain and Andrew were talking about there? Give me a shout, 0344 499 1000. Be very interested to hear your thoughts on that, and indeed all the stories we're talking about today. Pensions as well. We're going to talk to Richard Tice very shortly, and we're asking you the question about whether taxpayers should foot the bill for rescuing the MP's pension fund. Jane says basically pensioners will be taxed on their pensions so MPs can live the high life. Perhaps who made these decisions should pay for any shortfall. Robert's been in touch on energy, said we relied on Sir Nick Clegg's advice and did not pursue modular reactor generation. Fortunately, there are still some fossil fuels available, which will buy us time to commence modular generator construction. This is a last chance. We will need to immediately ignore Mr Miliband's advice and return him to caring for his constituents. Trump tariffs, Rachel's been in touch and says they're reciprocal, so don't retaliate. Just drop tariffs like Vietnam has done. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science, Rachel, but I do think it's a little bit more complicated than that. Steve says, no doubt Russia is always up to no good, but does the government seriously expect us to believe that we aren't up to the same games? And Chris Ottershaw says, what I would like to know is, are our government or armed forces removing or destroying these Russian devices in our waters? And if so, would there be consequences for doing so? Joanna in Salisbury. Hi, Cardi P. My preparations for war, kiss my family and go to bed. We are in a prominent position with military all around Salisbury and Portendown research establishment. A first target, the same as during the Cold War. Yeah, listen, if they launch the nukes, it's going to be minutes before we go. I am not packing a 72-hour survival kit, as I must say. And if it's nuclear war, we're all going to be gone. Hopefully that won't happen. Obviously, stay with us. We'll get your thoughts on all of these things. Free speech, accents, pensions, lots to come in just a second, including Richard Tice. So stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much for your company this morning. Amanda has given me a ring from Manchester about the accents issue, 0344 499 1000. Amanda, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hello, good morning. Throughout my life, I've always struggled with my accent.
I think you have a lovely accent, Amanda. What's wrong with your accent?
It's probably my telephone voice.
Your telephone voice, yes.
I do have one of those.
We all have a telephone voice.
So I grew up in North Manchester and I was sent to school in South Manchester, and the people there were quite well-spoken. And I suffered throughout my youth thinking that I needed elocution lessons and different stuff, trying to fit in and stuff. Actually, I was an au pair when I was 18 in Madrid, and I worked for a family whose the husband was from Paraguay, and he actually tried to fake an English accent so that he could fit in.
Okay,
and
wow.
he wanted to learn words like puddle, so he didn't appear to be so South American and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I've experienced it a lot, yeah. But
what do people say to you, Amanda? Do they just mimic your accent? What do they do?
Take the mickey out of it and that, yeah.
Is that something that were you genuinely very upset about that? Was that something you thought about?
When I was younger, yes, of course. I think in the environments that I've been in and put myself in. I was in Wilmslow yesterday, which is a very nice area of Manchester, but they don't speak any better or anything like that. I worked in the NHS for 25 years, so I worked with a lot of consultants with different accents. I once had an Indian doctor that was taking the mickey out of my Manchester accent as well.
Right, okay.
And I actually said to him, well, what would you do if I taken the mickey out of yours?
And what did he say to that?
So I've learned through. Oh, he didn't like it.
Okay. Yeah, but it was all right to do it with you. Do you think this is part of the British character? Is this just something we do because it is a point of difference?
Yes, so if you go into, like, Spain, I mean, I speak Spanish, part Italian. They have dialects and different regions, but the class divide isn't so big there.
Okay.
So I think it's to do with class as well.
Yeah. And you say class as class, not class.
Yes.
Yeah, and you say bath, not
I
bath.
think it's got something to do with that, definitely. But as I say, now I'm grown up and I'm confident, so I'm not. I embrace it now. I'm not worried. I think you should be very proud. So I think it's quite unique, actually, if you have an accent.
Is it? I love people who say I don't have an accent, and they're inevitably from the southeast of England, and they have a southeast of England accent. And I wonder why we think it's better or worse to have a certain accent. I mean, has that been part of your thinking? Did you think you were like a worse person because you didn't speak the same way other people spoke?
Yes, of course.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Genuinely, honestly. I mean, I'm off to Devon tomorrow. I'm going to a place called Sheldon in the southwest.
Yeah.
And it's and they all speak with a plum in the mouth. I mean, some of them look like they need a wash or, they work behind a bar. Right. But I'm thinking, but the way they speak, it's like they've been born like that. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's funny though, isn't it? But when you're young, it can be quite daunting.
Yeah. So I think my accent has probably changed a bit because I've lived in England for about half my life. And my brother is always sort of saying, "Oh, here comes Hyacinth Bouquet." Well, he's not as bad as that, but he thinks I've poshed it up, basically. And the thing is that if I don't know whether I have or not. I mean, sometimes I have, sometimes I haven't. But I remember coming back to university, at the start of different terms, and what one friend in particular would always say to me, Amanda, he would always say, "Peter, you've just got to slow down. You're just speaking far too quickly, and I just can't understand what you're saying." But I mean, it's interesting with the Manchester accent. I mean, I think you have a lovely accent, and I don't think. And you, as you say, you're older now, and I'm older, and I don't worry about it. It's not something I think about or I'm conscious of. But it can actually be an advantage as well. I think, I was maybe a bit different in the media. My career as the pawn shop Eamon Holmes has maybe been sort of helped by the fact that I don't have the same accent as every other presenter on this session, for example. I don't know, Amanda. What would you say to these people in Edinburgh who say that there should be training to tell people to stop taking the mick out of people's accents? Amanda, are you still there?
I think they should just toughen up a bit and just give it back to them. I mean, I love the Glaswegian accent. I love the Scottish accent. The part of when I go down to Edinburgh, I embrace it and I think, wow, I'm in a different place now.
Yeah.
I'm with, the people kind of thing. You don't all want to be generic and speak the same, do you?
It's true. And
I don't think we'll ever get over it because I think it's a class thing.
Okay. Amanda, great thoughts there. Really appreciate that. Let's hear from James. James has sent me a voice note. I wonder what his accent is. Let's hear what James has to say.
Hi, Peter. My mum was from Liverpool, and she spoke like a newsreader, never had an accent. Her parents were from Scotland, right up the top, place called Ock, on the Black Holes there. And the other side of your family were all from East London, so I speak like an East Londoner. Should I have gone to elocution lessons like she wanted me to? Has it affected my job? It has done, really has done. But it's who I am now, so that's it, innit? East London, that's me.
Proud of where you come from. I'm certainly very proud of where I come from, and I never try to disguise it necessarily, but I have spent half of my life in England, and maybe the edges have been taken off my accent a little bit. Very interesting to hear from James there, who is definitely from East London. There's no doubt about that. Let's hear from Anne in Sussex. Anne, I've spoken to you before, and as far as I can remember, you have a quite nice accent, quite a refined accent, if I remember correctly.
Well, that's very kind of you to say that from as a child, because I think I spoke a bit posh in our very poor school, but I didn't know that. But I didn't want to be unkind, but one of the gentlemen who spoke, and probably the last gentleman, I really couldn't understand them. There are accents I can understand you very well,
Ironically, I'm having trouble hearing you, Anne, because the line isn't great. Well, let's see if we can get Anne back on the line. It's just not a very clear line. Maybe it's mobile phone reception or whatever. But Anne's voice is very clear, but the line certainly isn't anyway. Sue has been in touch and says, let's frighten everyone to death, then we can shut everyone up and further the real invasion that is happening on our shores and our cities and our towns, she says. Jane has been in touch to say, morning, Peter. Just want to say a big thank you. I was watching your programme when you had Sir A.P. McCoy on Friday, and he tipped Nick Rockett, who backed her, won £470, all thanks to you. Well, Jane, thank you. I should have done that and didn't. I backed Duffel-Coat, who I think fell at the first fence. Anne, I think you're back on. We can hear you more clearly now. Go ahead.
Yes. Oh, well, my father-in-law was from Newcastle, and it was always hard to understand him. He never did change. We couldn't understand his accent very much at all. But I do love accents. But I think when it comes to radio and television, there was a King Queen's English.
Oh, we've lost Anne again, unfortunately. That's how ironic that we can't hear her. I remember I was actually working for Amber Rudd for a full 4 weeks at the Home Office, my glittering Home Office career, when she was Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, the MP. And there was a particular employee, quite a senior person at the Home Office, who had a very, very heavy Scottish accent. And she said, you know, I really like this guy, but I just cannot understand what he is saying, a very heavy Glaswegian accent. And I said, look, I have quite a strong accent, some people say. And she said, yes, but you have excellent diction. So I wonder if the point that Anne was making there, just about understanding people, maybe we can get Anne back a little bit later on in the programme. But for the meantime, I want to hear a couple more voice notes. Nick has been in touch from Loughborough, and he has disagreed with what Piers Pottinger was saying earlier on in terms of bad laws. Let's hear what Nick has to say.
I disagree with your commentator, Piers Pottinger, who I think normally speaks a great deal of sense. When he talks about, he considers that people shouldn't break any laws. I disagree, because some laws are just so bad and they're made based on the political ideology of whoever's in power. Under those circumstances, I think when bad laws are highlighted and pointed out, it's our duty to break them, because that's the only way they're going to get repealed or changed. Have a good day, Peter.
Nick, thanks for your thoughts there. I disagree with you, I'm afraid, and I agree with Piers, and I think we cannot advocate laws being broken, and if we want them to be changed, well, then we need to agitate peacefully. And Nick's not saying to do anything violent, obviously. I'm sure he would never do that. But look, we look at some of the great heroes throughout history. Martin Luther King, who had civil disobedience, who marched against bad laws. We look at people like Rosa Parks, for example, who sat down on a bus. That was obviously a stupid law and a racist law, and she involved herself in civil disobedience. It's a big, big question, and I do wonder where the limits are. Certainly things like abortion exclusion zones. I'm not sure where I stand on it, actually, because I heard from Fiona, and actually you can go back on my social media at Peter Cardwell or go to talkTV and see what Fiona said about being harassed, and she was harassed and blocked from going into an abortion clinic when she had to have an abortion because the child growing inside her had died. It's a very, very moving story, and I think it probably changed my view on this. I think civil disobedience is probably fine. You've got to protest, you've got to make your voice heard, but you've got to do so within the law, and you've got to certainly do so peacefully as well. And it's a big issue. I know I'm probably not making a lot of sense on this, because I can't, there are laws that I would rail against, but I think there are always ways to try to make your voice clear without breaking the law necessarily. Some of that, I think, is involving yourself in the democratic process. For example, we've got the local elections coming up. I know some of our viewers and listeners are running for election, for example, and that's a very powerful thing to do, even if you don't get elected at the end of it. There's a lot to talk about on this, and I really want to hear your views on it. 0344 499 1000. I also want to hear your views on the bill for rescuing the MP's pension fund. It's likely to fall on taxpayers because they've invested in ethical funds, in these environmental, social and governance investments. And guess what? It hasn't worked out. There's a big shortfall. We're going to hear from Richard Tice in just a second. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I am still holding a baton, and the baton is an important baton. The baton was handed to me by Richard Tice, who is the Deputy Leader of Reform UK. He used to present this programme between 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock, but he has gone on to do a real job, and that is as a Member of Parliament. He joins me now. Richard, good to see you in the studio. How are you doing?
Very good morning, yes. Great to be here.
You have uncovered something which I think is really concerning. This is about taxpayers apparently face footing the bill to rescue an MP's pension fund. What's happened here?
So, the MP's pension fund is partly contributed to by the taxpayer, partly by MPs. A fairly sort of typical situation, parts employed, part employer. But the reality is that because the trustees have been investing in ethical net zero style renewable projects, the fund has been underperforming, it hasn't met its benchmarks, and that means the taxpayer is on the hook for tens and tens of millions of additional contributions because of the obsession with what people call ESG net zero type investing. And so I've written to the trustees and said, I'm concerned about this, and it'll be interesting what response that I get. I mean, they actually admit in one of their documents that where they actually say that the trustees accept that ESG risks will impact on the returns of the fund. Well, hang on. I mean, that literally means they're accepting that political ideology is more important than their fiduciary duties to the beneficiaries of the pension fund. And I just think it's another example where the obsession with net zero and environmental, social governance issues is costing the taxpayer huge sums of money. Wherever I look, Peter, I just see waste and this stuff everywhere.
Is this definitely going to cost taxpayers money? Because in theory, the money could come back.
In theory, the money could come back, but they've now, if you look at the returns from this, over 1, 3 and 5 years, the fund has underperformed because primarily of these investments. And I think that when you look at other big investment managers around the world, people like BlackRock, they are now moving away from ESG investing because they're underperforming. So if they continue down this line, then I think they will continue to underperform. Is it a 100% guarantee? No. But history gives a very clear indication that this could well cost the taxpayer tens of millions of pounds, particularly as over 30% of this whole fund of 860 odd million pounds is invested in what they call illiquid assets that you can't buy and sell daily, like stocks and shares. And so those have to be valued on a different basis. They could well be very overvalued, and I'm concerned about that. I mean, they're in.
Just tell us about the sort of pension that MPs have. You've been an MP for 9 months. You're presumably paying into this pension scheme yourself?
Yes. So MPs pay, I think, about 11% of our salary into the pension scheme.
You get paid what, £90,000 a year, or something like that?
That's right. So we pay 11%. The taxpayer pays about 17% as the employer per se through the parliamentary.
That's a big contribution.
Far
bigger than many.
Which is much bigger than many. That's right. Because of the nature of the return. So, you know, this is the nature of public sector pensions, and that's another whole topic. So the thing is, if the better the funds perform, then the less the taxpayer should therefore have to contribute thereafter, because you get overvalued. But if you underperform, then the taxpayer is going to be on the hook to meet the liabilities of the pension fund. That's the standard way that defined benefit style pension funds work. And to be honest, that begs into a whole question. You know, should MPs looking after taxpayers' cash be receiving a defined benefit style type pension that the taxpayer's on the hook for? And
what do you think this all says? Because, well, there's a number of aspects I want to get into. First of all, I want to talk about the trustees themselves, who has actually made this decision. And secondly, what this says in that there is this basically gold-plated pension for MPs. If there is a shortfall, taxpayers could have to top it up. But, I mean, there are loads of people, you will know from your work in the private sector, there are loads of people who don't have a pension nearly as good as this.
Exactly.
And many pensioners who've taken a massive hit because their winter fuel allowance has been axed by this government.
And that's the great scandal about it, that we've got this sort of gold-plated pension scheme, like many people, stroke everybody in the public sector, and that essentially the backstop is the taxpayer. And I'm saying, if you are making significant investment decisions, they have an investment advisor, a firm called Hyman's, and they clearly need to explain themselves. And my instinct and my gut tells me that this is just part of Westminster's obsession with ESG investing, ethical investing, and net zero. So they've invested in energy renewable projects, they've invested in battery energy storage systems that I've uncovered, frankly, are unsafe. One caught fire 6 or 7 weeks ago in Essex, another one caught fire a few years ago in Liverpool. I don't think they should be doing this stuff. Okay. I think they should be investing in traditional equity funds that basically perform in line with the market. That's their responsibility, and if they do that, then the taxpayer would have to cough up a lot less. I
should say that the newspaper that wrote about the story, The Telegraph, did contact the House of Commons press office. They declined to comment, but we will see how this goes. What happens next? I mean,
I've written to the chair of the trustees. I will expect that they will look at the letter.
Who are the trustees?
There's a list of them. Some are MPs, some are experts in the field, and look, it's not easy being a trustee of a pension fund, but I think they've got to answer some serious questions that I've put forward, and no doubt they'll write to me. There may well be a meeting, and I'll keep people informed. And look, if they've got some answers to this, or if they've changed course since over the last few months, then fine. But I think it's right to raise these issues to make sure that taxpayers' money is being properly protected and looked after, and that's my objective in this.
Tell us what you think about what Richard has just said there. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, talking about the bill for rescuing MPs' pensions likely to fall on the taxpayers because of what they have put their money into. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Just while you're here, Richard, there's a couple of other stories around today I might ask your opinion on, actually. One is the poster that is around. We've seen it on the screen. We know that Kemi Badenoch and Darren Jones were asked about it, the leader of the Conservatives, obviously, and the Chief Secretary to the Treasury for Labour. It sort of has half of Nigel Farage's face, your party leader, and half of Kemi Badenoch's face. Are they one and the same?
Well, no, clearly not. I mean, they're two separate people.
It's just to clarify, they're two separate people. It's breaking news. They're two different people.
It's the nature of politics. You get these memes. Some are funny, some are not funny. The reality is, it goes with the territory, and it's the nature of it. There's a lot worse things out there. I think people see it for what it is. Actually focus on the issues, and the key issues in all of the many elections that are taking place on May the 1st is who people think is going to be able to change things at council level, at mayoral level, and that's what everybody is battling for and fighting for, and it's going to be a very interesting few weeks.
Tell me about another story that's been we've been talking about today, quite a lot of people reacting to it as well, which is about Lucy Connolly. Now, three quite prominent MPs, former Prime Minister Liz Truss, Suella Braverman, who some might argue is you're courting at reform, some people talking about that, and Bob Blackman, the chairman of the 1922 committee, influential committee of Conservative MPs, are saying that Lucy Connolly, this woman who tweeted in regard to the riots and what was happening with Southport, something I think was pretty distasteful what she tweeted, but she's been sent to prison for 31 months. Do you agree with Liz Truss and Suella Braverman and Bob Blackman that she should be out of prison by now?
Well, Alison Pearson wrote a brilliant long article on this in great detail yesterday. I would urge everybody listening and watching to read that. And yes, I tweeted out that she should be freed. She is clearly a victim of two-tier justice. There is no doubt whatsoever that the Prime Minister of this country, by setting out, he essentially implicitly directed the judges to impose very severe sentences at the time.
I'm sure they would argue that they were independent, but I mean, she spoke of mass deportations and setting fire to
what she tweeted was wrong. It was vile, but she realised that in the heat of the moment, she took it down 3 or 4 hours later and apologised. There are people who literally commit violent crimes who don't go to jail, who go to jail for much less time, or who are available for release on compassionate leave or whatever. and yet she's been denied all of those things. I'm afraid I think this is really sinister. She is the victim of two-tier justice, and I just think it's wrong. And I've tweeted out, of course, she should not be in prison for this.
Okay.
Whether it's community service or whatever, learn your lesson. But frankly, it's appalling.
One more question. Rupert Lowe, the controversy continues. There's clearly very bad blood between him and the MPs in your party. Tell me where things stand with that. Is there any way back ever for him? Are you going to talk to him again?
We've released an independent investigation which shows that there was credible evidence about harassment, and
which he denies, of course.
Which obviously he denies, and that's fine. We agree to disagree, but no, at the end of the day, he's now standing as an independent MP. We're pushing on with our programme. We're leading in the polls. As far as we're concerned, it's old news. We move on, and when we're out on the doors, up and down the country, this never comes up. What comes up is who's actually got the policies that's going to make people better off. And in our view, we've got to scrap net stupid zero. We've got to cut daft regulation. And we've got to cut taxes and stop wasting taxpayers' cash. And that's why the story at the beginning is just one tiny example across so much of council spending and government spending. You just see waste everywhere. It drives me mad. And if we cut all that wasteful spending, then we can cut taxes and we can get this country growing again. That's the critical thing.
I want to give you some of the reaction that is coming in on this poll. Says MPs should have a private pension that they and the taxpayers pay into until they leave or lose their seats, and then take the private pension with them. We as taxpayers should stop paying into it. Another person, Madden Hove, says the whole salary is taxpayer money. So is the 11% the MP pays in, so the 17% is taxpayer money as well. Laughable, just one MP gravy train. And that is how a lot of people feel about this, Richard.
And that's why I've raised it. And the person who just tweeted, I mean, that is obviously correct, because MP salaries come from the taxpayer. So that's why this has got to be done properly and correctly. And yeah, I think the whole issue of the huge quantities going into public sector pensions that are essentially taxpayer backed and protected relative to private sector pensions, and I think many people underestimate that when they talk about public sector pay. These are very generous pension schemes, and that's why I'm proud to have raised it.
Very interesting. Just one more thing, actually, I've just been asked to ask you about in regard to the two Labour MPs who've been denied entry to Israel. I'm sure you've seen this story in a post on Twitter. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy has tagged Kemi Badenoch and said it's disgraceful you're cheerleading another country for detaining and deporting two British MPs. Do you say the same about Tory MPs banned from China? This government will continue to stand up for the rights of our MPs to speak their mind, whatever their party. And this is Kemi Badenoch saying she's not surprised that Israel's deported two Labour MPs during a parliamentary tour. What do you make of that story, Richard?
Yeah, I'm not surprised that Israel has denied entry to these two MPs. They concluded that they were not conducive to Israel's peace and security, given what those MPs have been saying and writing with regard to the Gaza issue and Israel. So, yeah, frankly, Israel is a sovereign nation, and they've made their own decision. And I'm not surprised at all. Frankly, I'm surprised that those two MPs thought it was appropriate, given what they were saying and writing about Israel, but what on earth did they think they were doing trying to go into Israel?
Oh, they're going to go to the West Bank. We may talk about this later in the programme, but Richard, thank you. We've covered a lot of ground there. That's Richard Tice, who is the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, and we're asking the question this morning about whether taxpayers, you think, should foot the bill to rescue the MP's pension fund. It'd be very interesting to hear your reaction to what Richard said there. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
Harry and Meghan have never actually worked in their lives. But fancy picking on a black female, which Harry has just done, given, as you've laid out, all of what's gone before us, accusing the royal family of racism, but of course very cleverly not saying who, so that the thing would fester and fester. So it has come back to bite them. But where we shouldn't be surprised is, don't forget, Harry, this is the individual that years ago was photographed wearing a Nazi uniform.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We'll take a couple of calls in a second, but first I want to hear some voice notes. Firstly, from Ian on chlorine-washed food.
Hi, Peter. It's Ian from East Grinstead. Listen to your person talking about chlorinated chicken. I mean, is he aware that when you buy your salad that's already been pre-washed, it's actually been washed in chlorinated water? And how many people go on holiday somewhere in the States and happily will go and eat chicken? I mean, the whole thing about chlorinated chicken is just a knee-jerk reaction. There's nothing wrong with it. It's all these people seem to throw back all the time who don't fully understand what's going on.
Interesting perspective there, Ian. Thanks for that. Anna's been in touch on Russia.
Morning, Peter. Busy at work, earning money to give to this vile government, listening to you, of course. Reference Russia. To be honest, if in 4 years Reform UK doesn't get in, or a similar party, I wouldn't mind Russia invading us. That's how much I feel trodden down by this government. In fact, I'd probably help Russia. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
That is, and I'm really sad to hear you're at that line of thinking, that state of mind in regard to our government. I just don't think Putin would be in any way better. I think it would be a whole lot worse than what we have at the moment, which absolutely isn't perfect. Not saying that for a second. Jason's in Sheffield. Jason, I know you've given me a ring about this sort of 72-hour grab bag, making sure we're all ready for an invasion. Will you be packing your kit?
Well, you've got to laugh at this actually when you think about it, because state of our armed forces at the minute have been hollowed out that much. I think 72 hours is about right, because that's about how long.
That's about as long as they'll last.
War. Yeah, that's about how long Britain would last if we went to war. So that's probably about right, 72 hours. So, but,
are you worried about the threat from Russia?
I think you always have to be worried about it, but it doesn't keep me awake at night, put it that way.
Yeah, okay. Jason, thanks for your perspective. Appreciate that. Kelvin's been in touch with a voice note. Let's hear what Kelvin has to say.
Good morning, Peter. Good show as normal. If the left wing was so good and so brilliant at doing what they do, you know, and everything that they say is right, why is the country in such a bloody mess that it's in? People not working, people having money taken off, and tax. Everything in life is taxed. There's no relief on anything at all. Everything you buy is taxed. Everywhere you go, taxed. You know, it's ridiculous. So if the left wing was so brilliant, why are we in such a mess? Obviously, their politics, this government's politics, not working, are they? Clearly. So it just shows how bad the left wing are. They're nothing but a bunch of villains. Anyway, my rant's over again. Bye.
Thanks, you're welcome to have a rant anytime you like, Calvin. Appreciate that. And he kept it to less than a minute as well, so thank you for that. Please feel free to send in your voice notes. We'll have some more in a minute. 0344 499 1000. Just the same way you send a voice note to anybody else, and keep it to less than a minute, please, so we give everybody a chance to say what they want to say on the air, including Georgina, who's in London, who hasn't sent me a voice note. She's given me a ring on the same number, 0344 499 1000, on this pensions issue we were talking about with Tice Baby a few minutes ago. Georgina, what do you make of it?
Well, I think it's an absolutely diabolical liberty that they should want the British public to subsidise their pensions when they've cut the pension for the the heating allowance for the elderly. I know they've given them a little rise in the pension, but I'm very sorry, one counteracts the other. So, in essence, you've given them nothing. I feel that the government should be given a pension, a state pension like any other pensioner. The fact that they want to have all this extortionate rises in the monies in pensions that they get. I mean, you've got a Speaker of the House who spent £7 million on his grace and favour flat. How many pensioners would that help in this country? On top of that, flights, holidays, that's another 250,000. You've got other MPs spending £900 a month on their dogs to have them stay at their home.
I think, Georgina, everything you've said, I think, represents a real anger that people have about MPs and how some of them, not all of them, but some of them are spending their money. I mean, they're entitled to a pension if they work, they're entitled to a pension if they pay into it. I agree with you that there's a huge amount of anger in regard to this, and I just wonder what you think the solution is.
Well, the solution is the pension should be based on performance. They should get a state pension like any other pensioner in this country. If they perform well on behalf of this country, then they get added benefits. If they do not, which I'm very sorry to say the present government have not done a good job at all, the country is in an absolute mess, then they should have a state pension baseline like everybody else. I think the entitlement of this government is absolutely breathtaking. Okay. They are not worth the money, Peter, and I am sorry to say I do not think that they should be subsidised by the British taxpayer.
Georgina, thanks for your thoughts. Rob's in Portsmouth and has given me a ring on the same number, 0344 499 1000. Rob, on this MP's pay and pension deal, they're getting much the same deal as the civil service, presumably, but the problem that Richard Tice is saying is that they've invested in the wrong things and that the taxpayer may well need to make up that shortfall. What do you make of this?
Well, I think what a lot of people seem to miss, and everyone uses the word Orwellian too much, but it feels like we're secondary modern school boy, but we did Animal Farm. Yeah. It feels like we're in Animal Farm. And
do you feel some are more equal than others?
No, but some people do. But what I think people are missing is they talk about the MP's pension and the MP's pay, and if you ever when you interview them, they say, well, it's not our decision. It's not our decision. It's an independent body, and it's based on what civil servants get in their pay. Yeah. Who votes on civil servants' pay? Well, exactly, and makes that decision. And recently, they have given civil servants a huge pay rise, which means they get a huge pay rise.
And it's not just civil services. Many public sector workers have got a 5% pay rise, which is a far bigger pay rise than so many other people have received, Rob.
Yes, and that means that the MPs and they also get a big pay rise because they have given civil servants pay rise. Well, that's up to IPSA, the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority. Rob, thanks for your thoughts on that. I appreciate that. Rachel has been in touch with a voice note on MPs' pensions. This is what Rachel has to say.
I don't think the taxpayers should be picking up the bill for this pension fund. What I think we should do is have a UK Doge, and I can guarantee you they'll find the money, and they'll probably find a lot more that's going to useless causes, just like America has.
Very interesting thoughts from Rachel. She made them in 16 seconds as well. See, less than a minute. It is possible. Sean's in Cheshire and has sent a slightly longer voice note about MPs' pensions. Let's hear what Sean has to say.
Peter, morning. It's Sean of Cheshire. I just heard you talking about the MPs wanting the taxpayer to foot the shortfall. Absolutely not. There is a saying that's been out, and it's called "Go woke, go broke." If they want to invest in arty-farty ESG stuff, wokery, then they should pay the consequences for that, and then they should see what it's done before they start investing our country's pension funds into the same rubbish. We know that's not where the money is. That's why the money hasn't happened, and the taxpayer shouldn't have to foot the bill because they've made mistakes. Because if it gets footed once, it'll get repeatedly foot. We'll foot the bill repeatedly. It's no, absolutely not. They should pay the price for their own stupidity. Thanks, mate. Keep it up.
Thanks, Sean. I very much enjoyed the use of the phrase arty-farty there, which I think is not used enough in our society. It also reminds me of one of my favourite cartoons, which is there's a dog sitting in a front garden, and he's got some pretentious glasses on and a sort of a top with black and white stripes on it, and it says "Beware of the avant-garde dog," which is a nice, clever cartoon there. Thank you to Mick. He says the government will have to update the little blue book issued to police and councils during the Cold War in the event of a nuclear attack. I will dig mine out. Pete in Southend here. My girlfriend long ago brought loads of tin food and dried stuff. It sits in the loft room. Also a cubed water purifier which supplies sweet water free of bacteria and viruses or poisons. She is a prepper. Clearly she is. Well, maybe in the 72 hours you should go and stay with your girlfriend, Peter. You'll be in a much better state than many of us if the nuclear attack comes, which hopefully it won't. And then we wouldn't have to worry about the MPs' pensions because we'd all be dead. Right then, we're going to talk in just a second about shock figures revealing the true scale of kids' deadly weapon crimes across the country. We're also going to talk more about accents. Loads of people getting in touch about that. Free speech too is something you want to talk about. We'll do that in the next hour. Be sure to give me a call, 0344 499 1000. We'll continue the conversation between now and 1 here on Talk. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 12 o'clock. This is Talk. A very good afternoon. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you for your company. There's loads to talk about between now and 1 o'clock here on Talk, including shock figures revealing the true scale of kids' deadly weapon crimes across the country. Lots of research has been done into this since the controversial drama, which a lot of people don't like, I do like it, I must say, on Netflix called Adolescence, which has been out in the last few weeks and causing all sorts of people to write and tweet and talk about it. We're also going to be talking about the mother jailed for the Southport Twitter post. Should she be freed? Well, that is what Liz Truss says. Also a couple of other senior MPs, including a former Home Secretary. We'll talk about Edinburgh University lecturers trained on accent bias. Are you biased against people because of their accents? I'd love to hear it from someone who says, yeah, actually, you know, if someone has, I don't know, a Liverpool accent or a Birmingham accent, we take them less seriously. I'm just plucking those out of the air. May well be a Northern Ireland accent. Maybe don't take me seriously because of my accent. I don't know. Jeremy Kyle sometimes doesn't. We'll hear from you as well, and I want your opinion on all of these topics. We're going to talk about the BBC and their thoughts on Muslims, which is something that has been causing controversy over the last few days. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also use the main number to do one of three things. You can send me a voice note. Plenty of those coming in. Keep them coming between now and 1. Less than a minute, please. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message, and you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000, the main number that does all those different things. Loads to talk about between now and 1. Would love to hear from you. Stay with us here on Talk. Susan's been in touch from Chelmsford and says, all my life I have been fed the Russian threat, and what I'm actually seeing is the withdrawal of Russia and NATO getting bigger. So it's the US that has nearly 1,000 foreign bases, and Russia has 21, mostly in the countries on their border. Does the US have 1,000 foreign bases? That sounds a lot to me. Dave in South Gloucester says, maybe MPs should be forced to pay for the shortfall in the MPs' pension fund themselves. If that happened, perhaps a good proportion would resign and force a general election. We may then get a new batch who are driven by public service and patriotism and not by greed, self-interest or opportunities to avail themselves of freebies. Amanda says, the story on survival kits is, I feel, very irresponsible, but at the same time I hope this will focus the minds of people on the sheer foolhardy agenda of Ed Miliband and his carbon dioxide obsession, which is crippling and endangering the country. We get this every now and again, Amanda, don't they? Say, oh, you got to prep, you got to have a survival kit and all the rest of it. I just don't think it's going to make a blind button of difference if there is some sort of nuclear attack, which I hope there isn't. Sue has been in touch and said, another Susan, says politicians and civil servants should suffer the same losses as everyone else does. Their pensions are crazily generous and should be cut anyhow. Messing up the country shouldn't be rewarded. And Mick says, I hope there will be no bailout of the MP's pension fund, as the waspy women were told to suck it up. Mark says, good morning, Peter. Forget Russia and you will be better off preparing for the fallout from net zero. Russia is just to distract the plebs from the managed decline of the United Kingdom. I would fight for my family, but I would no longer fight for what is left of our once great country, and would suggest conscription would not be backed by the majority of the UK population. Mark, I think you're absolutely right. Let's talk about another aspect, and this is shock figures revealing the true scale of children's deadly weapons crimes across the country. This is the Mirror saying that as many as 3,591 knife and offensive weapon crimes by 10 to 17-year-olds were dealt with by the criminal justice system in the year ending September 2024. And this is, on average, there were 69 cautions or convictions in England and Wales a week, or 10 a day. This has come out, so many people talking about, and have been for weeks really, about the Netflix drama called Adolescence, which I've seen. I think it's very good as a piece of drama. I'm not sure about all the different aspects of it, and it's controversial for all sorts of reasons. Let's get some perspective on these numbers, though, about knife and offensive weapon crimes from Peter Blexley. He's our crime commentator. He is a former Metropolitan Police detective. He's host of Crime Suspects, which is made by this network as well, the YouTube show. He's an author and a speaker and knows these things absolutely back to front. Peter, it's good to talk to you this morning, but this is a very, very concerning number, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, young people aged between 10 and 17 years old carrying knives and other weapons, predominantly knives, in these huge numbers, over 3,500 a year. And when you couple that with all the adults, of which that number gets multiplied many, many times over, it just goes to show how sadly, how many weapons are out there on the streets of Britain, how increasingly dangerous this country is becoming. And if people want to take issue with me on that, then just look at the murder statistics carried out by people carrying knives, let alone all the other crimes. And those murder stats would be much, much higher if it wasn't for the brilliance of our surgeons, our nurses, our doctors and the medical teams.
It does seem that time and time again, the politicians of all hues and stripes, Conservatives, Labour, they say we're going to ban zombie knives, we're going to deal with this problem, we're going to crack down on knife crime. It doesn't seem to make much of a difference, Peter. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, and it doesn't. And what needs to be addressed, and may I say, not by the police, is that mindset that says to anybody, whether it be a child or an adult, that when they prepare to leave their home, they go, right, okay, where's my phone? Where's my keys? Maybe some cash. Where's my knife? It's that mindset that needs to be addressed. With so many children, they're carrying them because they think it will make them safe, when of course the statistics prove conclusively that if you take a knife out onto the streets, then you are far more likely to become a victim of knife crime yourself.
I agree with what you say in that it should not be the police's responsibility. It is their role to police, not to tell people how they should, or the values that they should have and the lives they should lead. That is for parents, that is for people as citizens, that is for schools, that's for all sorts of different organisations. How do we change the culture, Peter, in all of this? Because there are far too many people who believe that carrying a knife is something that is an acceptable thing to do, or feel that they have to do it.
Yeah, everybody that you mentioned, parents, schools, and teachers won't thank me for it, but it can be related to in schools, social workers, probation officers, role models. Everybody's got a role to play in discouraging people from carrying knives, and many people have done that, including wonderful charities. But the problem is the message is clearly not getting through in the manner that it should, because sufficient numbers are not being discouraged. What the police should do is revert back to being a police force. They can still call themselves a service. I've no objection to that. But if they serve the public like they should do, and what that means in regards to this particular issue is stop and search, and lots of it, because it's effective. Where these crimes are happening, where the murders are happening, where the people are carrying knives, get out there and stop and search people relentlessly. Of course, politely, robustly and firmly if need be, but do it, and do lots of it. Don't worry about those who sit around thinking that police officers should be on beanbags discussing sociological matters, and don't worry about the self-appointed community leaders who bang on about the racism aspect to it all, because what officers need to do is try and stop these young people carrying knives and, quite frankly, slaughtering each other.
Yeah, and it is an absolutely horrendous thing. Have you watched Adolescence? Is that something that you've watched, Peter?
No, there's nothing a television drama can teach me about raising teenage boys. I'm the father of 3 young men who would not take a knife out onto the street and are all contributing members of society.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if I could ask you about something else, Peter, and that is this mother, Lucy Connolly, who's been jailed for this post on Twitter. And she is, I'm just going to read out, not the exact words, obviously, because it's the daytime and I don't want to use this bad language, but if we could just get it up on the screen with the asterisks, of course, to make sure that we don't have that bad language there. But I'll read this here. And it's mass deportation now, said Lucy Connolly. Set fire to all the effing hotels full of the bees for all I care, while you're at it to take the treacherous government and politicians with them. I feel physically sick knowing what these families will now have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it. That is not a pleasant thing to put out in the Twitter sphere. Should she be in jail for it? Because Liz Truss, Bob Blackman, senior Conservative MP, and the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, think Lucy Connolly should not be in prison. I wonder what your thoughts are from a law and order perspective, Peter.
Whenever we discuss Lucy Connolly's case, we need to, in our heads, rewind to that dreadful day of the Southport butchery, and what Rhoda Buchanan did that day. Because I remember watching it unfold on the television and being utterly outraged by what had happened when those beautiful young lives were snuffed out and so many other fabulous people were butchered, but fortunately saved by the medics. We need to remember how we felt there, and I am certainly not going to condone the vile words of Lucy Connolly, because what she said was vile. But let's have some context around this. Lucy Connolly needed to be punished, but she does not need now to be languishing in a prison where when we have so many people, and how many times have you and I discussed this, vile, revolting, stinking paedophiles who create and share disgusting images of child sex abuse throughout the internet, who get suspended sentences. Yeah. And they are in their droves.
Hugh Edwards didn't go to prison.
No, exactly. Lucy has been punished. It is time for that punishment to now cease. She will, of course, be subject to input from the probation service and all of that. But now it's not about punishment anymore. It's all about torture.
Peter, thanks for your thoughts on that. That's Peter Blexley, our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police detective. Bit of a development on these MPs, these two Labour MPs who attempted to go to Israel. They were going to go to the West Bank, which is one of the occupied territories, disputed territories there in the Middle East. And the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Richard Fuller, has told our colleagues over at Times Radio, any member of Parliament who goes on an official trip should be, I would think, welcomed in any country. They're going there to be better informed about the situation and then report back to their parliamentary colleagues about what they have found. He was asked by our colleagues at Times Radio if Richard Fuller, this Conservative, was concerned over an increasingly authoritarian tone being taken by some countries, and Mr. Fuller said, I think we should all be very worried about democracy. Democracy isn't a guarantee in life. Freedom isn't guaranteed. Well, we'll bring you any further updates on that story. That's two Labour MPs who went to Israel. They were there on an official parliamentary trip and they were told they were not welcome and they were sent home. Lots of people getting in touch. Andy in Preston says, my pension fund has also gone down, but no one is bailing me out, so why should I be expected to cover losses for highly paid, underperforming and incompetent MPs? Graham in Birmingham says, it's not just the refuse problem in Birmingham, it's every single department that is in failure mode. Council staff are hardly ever at their place of work, says Graham. And we talked about that poster earlier on, very famous political poster which had Labour isn't working, in a big line of people, and a number of people will remember it from the time, but it's one of the most famous political posters ever in this country. And Leslie says the Tories should have a new poster stating Labour is still not working. Fiona's been in touch to say these council leaders make a lot of the mess that affects our everyday lives and communities. People need to get up and vote, especially when this government is going to hand over more powers to councils. Let's just have a couple of voice notes before the break as well. Bob's been in touch on this pensions issue. Lots of people getting in touch about that. Bob has sent a short voice note. Let's hear what he had to say.
Peter, I was just thinking, these pensions for the MPs, no wonder everything for net zero gets through our Parliament. It's like insider trading. They're voting for their own pensions when they vote for net zero. Thanks.
Maybe insider trading, Bob, but it hasn't been too lucrative for them if they've lost all this money. But very good point. Michael's been in touch as well after the Richard Tice interview a little bit earlier on. Let's hear what Michael has to say with his voice note.
Morning, Peter. Michael from High Wycombe. Great show again. On Richard Tice's point about pensions, the bigger issue is that public sector seem to be addicted to salary-based pension schemes. They're just not sustainable. It doesn't matter whether it's MPs or local authorities. They just need to go and they need to be rebased. Otherwise, we have a pension liability that runs into trillions, not billions. It needs to be changed, and it needs to be retrospective as well. Have a great day. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for your thoughts on that. We're asking the question today, should taxpayers foot the bill to rescue the MP's pension fund? Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Lots of people still want to talk about this abortion controversy as well. Lots on accents as well, much less serious issue, but nonetheless one we're going to talk about very soon. David in the Cotswolds says, great show, linking together your regional accent story with the abortion clinic exclusion zone. We all know what banter is and we all know what bullying is. It has nothing to do with free speech. What the lady was doing standing inside the exclusion zone with her placard was bullying. We're all adults and we all know what she was doing. We don't need legislation to know that, says David. Lots of people want to talk about accents and we're going to do that in just a minute. We've got a lot of other stories as well. We're going to talk about the BBC and Muslims. We're going to talk about Edinburgh University. Lots more to come, and stay with us here on Talk.
Harry and Meghan have never actually worked in their lives. But fancy picking on a black female, which Harry has just done, given, as you've laid out, all of what's gone before us, accusing the royal family of racism, but of course very cleverly not saying who, so that the thing would fester and fester. So it has come back to bite them. But where we shouldn't be surprised is, don't forget, Harry, this is the individual that years ago was photographed wearing a Nazi uniform.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch, and we'll get to those messages and calls in just a second. But we have some breaking news now here on Talk, and that is a man has been shot dead in a town in the northeast of England. Police have said officers were called to an address in Stanley in County Durham at about 5:20 last night after reports of a disturbance, according to Durham Constabulary. This is a man in his 50s who was found to have been shot despite the efforts of paramedics. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and police have said his family have been informed, are being supported by specially trained officers. So that is the breaking news here on Talk of a man being shot dead in a town in northeast England. It happened last night in Stanley in County Durham about 5:20 after reports of a disturbance. A man in his 50s was found to have been shot, and despite the efforts, we are told by Durham Constabulary, of paramedics, he was pronounced dead at the scene, and police said his family have been informed, are being supported by the specially trained officers that support people in these very, very bad circumstances. So we'll bring you any more information we get on that in the next 39 minutes between now and 1 o'clock. But that is the breaking news from County Durham. Lots of people getting in touch on all sorts of issues. Accents are a big one. Lots of people want to talk about that. And Paul has been in touch and says, getting caught with a knife on the street and the police, and you get a warning from police, but ill-advised words on X, and even though you take them down, you're in prison. Who is the government actually looking after? Andrew says, considering the way all governments are reluctant to enable the average pensioner to be able to live, why on earth should we help them not to come nearer to our level? Speaking as a pensioner who signed up to SERPs and has been penalised for it since doing so. Penny in Essex says, should the taxpayer rescue the politicians' pension fund? Absolutely not. Not since they've ripped off our pensioners from anyone else they can, says Penny in Essex. Tom in Bletchley says, never mind the MP's pension fund. What about the cost of the civil service? A public service employee's pension, their contributions have hardly increased in the past few years either. Lots of accents that I will get to, I promise, but let's hear about Russia and Macron and Starmer and the coalition of the willing. This is what Rachel has said in her voice note. Take it away, Rachel.
I think Starmer and President Macron need to wind their neck in on this European coalition of the willing, because it just shows that there are unwilling people in Europe and Europe is divided. I mean, Russia is not to be messed with. Putin's hearing all this and he's taking it seriously. And I don't think the rest of us are. But we should. And another thing is, how many people would fight for this country anymore? Because a lot of people think we haven't got a country left to fight for.
Rachel, I think a lot of people will agree with all of the sentiments you have there. Christopher's been in touch on chlorinated chicken.
Hi, Peter. It's Chris from Epsom, enjoying the show. That guy that was just you played his message about the chlorinated chicken. He's wrong. The chlorinated chicken and chlorinated beef and growth hormones they use in American meat, the chlorination wash kills all the vitamins and nutrition. You might as well be eating cardboard.
Okay, well, I can't remember actually eating chicken in America. I'm sure I have at some point. I'm going to America actually later this year, and I wonder if the chicken tastes differently. Maybe I should check. Maybe I shouldn't check because because it's all chlorinated. Peter is in Croydon and has been in touch on MP's pensions. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You can too between now and 1 o'clock. Peter, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hello, Peter. Yeah, I've got another point as well I want to make, Bud.
Go for it.
Yeah, the MPs' pay. I mean, they probably picked a high risk, so high risk, high return. But yeah, because we know they're greedy, to be honest with you. And well, if Richard Tice hadn't have told us, then we would know anything.
That's true.
And I just think it shows how corrupt the governments are.
Well, it's not corruption, is it? It's saying they wanted to invest in things. They've lost the money, but the question is, should we have to pay for it? What do you think, Peter?
No. It's a misuse of funds, isn't it?
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. So anyway, my second point, Peter, is about those 2 MPs who've been banned from Israel.
Yes.
Yeah. David Lammy has put out a statement saying how awful it is, we should support these MPs. But it's him who would ban Benjamin Netanyahu, wouldn't he?
Well, he's been pictured. He's talked to Benjamin Netanyahu. He's been pictured with him, and he said previously anyway that he's no big fan of him. He said he's no big fan of Donald Trump, and he sat down to dinner with him as well. So, but shouldn't? Well, it's interesting. Emily Thornberry, who is the chairwoman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, has said that she thinks Israel should be less thin-skinned. What do you think?
What's that mean?
Well, just someone who doesn't take criticism very well reacts and becomes very annoyed by criticism, being too thin-skinned.
Well, can you blame them, to be honest with you? I can't, because, if people could blame anything on Israel, they would, But Israel have had enough, and this is why they're doing what they're doing.
Okay.
Enough's enough.
Peter, thanks for your thoughts there. That's Peter in Croydon. Loads of people getting in touch on accents. I want to play a couple of voice messages, and then I want to take a call from Robert in Hertfordshire. Joan, first of all, please.
Morning, Peter. Ours is the most pulled apart accent. Wherever I go, a holiday anywhere. Are you a Brummie? I'm not quite a Brummie, but yes. And ours isn't the most rigged. Everybody pulls at it, and there's not many Brummies on the telly either. I've known one man, a tall man with blonde hair, but he was brilliant. The only time there's a Brummie accent on the telly is on an advert where they take the mick out of something. Well, let me tell you, we can take it. We don't mind. We're a happy load of people. So, I won't keep you any longer. Ta-ra.
Joan, I think your accent is lovely, and thank you very much for your message there. It's a really interesting one, actually. And I think you're right. I just wonder whether there would be, we've had Welsh people reading the news, or Scottish people reading the news, for example. Would you hear a Brummie or someone with a more controversial, I suppose is the wrong word, but an accent that people often mock? Liverpool, for example. I mean, Jodie, who works with us, is from Liverpool, and Jeremy is always mocking her accent, and mine. He's an equal opportunity mocker. Matt is in Hove and has some thoughts on accents as well.
Peter, Matt in Hove here. On the accent thing, I think English people have always done it. They've always mimicked an accent in a jovial way. I was a council estate kid, and I went to one of the top London public schools, and I found it quite easily just to plumb up and speak properly. But also, if I was, playing golf with a couple of northern mates, then you'd be saying "e up ducky" most of the way round. What I have noticed is if anyone's got a different skin colour, then it's a complete no-no to do anything to do with accents, which I've always found a bit odd. You're still doing the same thing. But anyway, and as for your brother saying you're Hyacinth Bouquet, you look more like her than you sound like her. You sound like you're from Northern Ireland, but he obviously has a much stronger accent. You might not play this out because I said that, but anyway, good show.
I look more like Hyacinth Bouquet. Do you know what? Someone said I look like Claire Balding, and you can't unsee it. You cannot unsee it, let me tell you. Listen, let's go to Robert in Hertfordshire on accents. 0344 499 1000. Thank you for that. Robert, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter. Just before I do talk about accents, you've mentioned the ET word, Emily Forbury.
I did.
Right?
I did.
when I've moved up into Hertfordshire from Clerkenwell, and she was my MP.
Oh, lucky you.
Never ever see her. But my claim to fame is I told her to pee off twice in 2 elections running. I opened the window when she was she knocked on my door. I lifted the window up because I lived in the Georgian house, shouted out, and her minions scattered.
Right.
She stood there. This was the Jeremy Corbyn when she was representing him. I said, I don't vote for Marxists. So she said, I'm not a Marxist. So I said, no, but your governor is. So that's that done. Right?
Okay, you made your point there, Robert, yeah.
That's my claim to fame. With accents, listen, we should embrace all of it. You can tell I'm a Cockney. We should embrace all accents. But there's a new accent in this country now, and it's the accent of not speaking English and don't want to. Right? Now, that's the one that we should be worried about. Okay, so
you think people should have to speak English if they're in this country? Well, if they're going to live in this country, Robert.
I think people should, not only the accent, embrace the culture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to a certain extent. I'm not singling anybody out, but you know, you've got.
No, well, I know what you mean. It is absurd that, you know, if you go to live somewhere on a permanent basis, I wouldn't dream of going to live in France and not learning French. It wouldn't occur to me. And most French people would say, well, you've got to learn French. That's the language of this country. Yet in this country, as you correctly say, Robert, there are loads of people who can't speak English. In fact, or people who don't have any good English. And look, if you come here as a pensioner, for example, if you're living here legitimately, legally as a pensioner, and you perhaps don't have the opportunity to learn as well as other people, you should at least try. But you're right, Robert, there are people who just don't try at all and want to not learn the language.
Well, I know people who moved to Spain and they've got kids, and their kids go to Spanish lessons.
Yeah,
because they're embracing the culture.
Yeah,
they still not lost their identity. I mean, I'm listening to your accent. Is it Northern Ireland?
Yeah, Northern Ireland. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but you've cleaned it up a bit, right? Because I'll tell you why. Because my aunties who come from Northern Ireland, and you always end it with "so I will," so you are. So
yes.
Right. You always drop that, and I love it. I love a proper Belfast accent. Yeah, and it's the same as Cockneys. I mean, we do get. I'm a proper Cockney, but I'll tell you what. I come from North London, which is just at the Old Street by the Barbican. We call it North London now. It's Clerkenwell, but it's come under Islington.
Yeah.
But I can definitely tell a South Londoner.
Right, okay, you can tell the difference, yeah.
I can tell what's that. Is that the same with you in Belfast?
Oh yeah. No, there are people who live 6 miles down the road from me who I can tell that they have the different accent and they're from a different place from me. I can tell it. Yeah, no, it is one of those things that you just pick up and you have an ear for it, certainly. Jason, Robert in Hertfordshire, thank you. Jason has been in touch from the Lake District. He says the only barometer for poshness is if you get out of the bath to have a wee. And he's also responded to Amber Rudd, the former Home Secretary, saying that I had excellent diction. He says that must go on your tombstone. I think it probably will. Dawn in Chelmsford says some accents are very relaxing to listen to. The late great Richard Burton is a great example. Your own accent projects calm, says Dawn. I love Richard Burton's accent. He was a fantastic actor, absolutely brilliant. There's actually a really brilliant play about Richard Burton as well, called The Motive and the Cue, which I saw recently with a very good friend of mine, and it's just brilliant. It's really worth seeing, and you can see it in those National Theatre Live things, where they do the play in the cinema. It's fantastic. It's so much cheaper than going to an expensive theatre as well. It's a bit more expensive than going to see a film, but I went to see The Motive and the Cue there, and it was brilliant, and so much of it was about Richard Burton and his amazing accent. Fiona says, I love accents up and down Britain. That's what makes us. The problem is I have students paying huge fees and courses in universities in Britain and struggle to understand what they're saying in lectures. Annie, who now lives in Nottinghamshire, says, you have a wonderful accent I could listen to all day. Thank you, Annie. Way back in the late 60s, as an 18-year-old Lancashire lass with a Wigan accent, I was at teacher training college in the Midlands. My first teaching practice was at a secondary school in Birmingham. Imagine their delight at my pronunciation of look, book, cook. They thought it hilarious. I learned to speak so students could understand me. Keep up your fab shows on Talk. All good things. Well, listen, I lived in South Africa for a while during my gap year, and I certainly modified my accent because it was the time in my life probably where more people just couldn't understand me. They just had no conception of what a Northern Irish accent was, and I get that, I understand that. But I mean, the word 8, for example, 7, 8, 9, I would say is 8, which is not the way I usually speak, and I shouldn't have to do it, but people just couldn't understand what I was saying if that's the word I was saying. Sue says, I have never even thought about your accent, says Sue. You're clever, clear and cheerful, so why would I be listening to your accent? It's warm and welcoming and full of youthful wisdom. Sue, you can stay. Vicky in Bournemouth wants to talk about Lucy Connolly, and he says, Cardi P, it's definitely two-tier justice. Starmer stamped down so hard over the riots last year as he doesn't want any dissent regarding mass immigration, reason being he has no intention of stopping it. If we don't stand up though, by the time of the next general election, this country will be beyond saving. Thanks for letting us speak, sweetie, says Vicky, and thank you to Bob in Cheltenham as well, who's been in touch. He says, I always appreciate Peter Blexley's insight, but to compare the sentence of Lucy Connolly with sentences for paedophiles is confusing two separate matters with two separate crimes presenting different risks. It is right to consider the context of Lucy Connolly's offence, and the context is that tensions were high and there was a very real risk of violence on our streets, in part because of such incendiary social media posts. Much like the sentences imposed during the 2011 riots, they were lengthier in general in order to deter further offending. Context is key when reviewing this sentence. Great show as always, Pound Shop Eamon, says Tim, so thank you for that. Sorry, not Tim, Bob in Cheltenham. Bob in Cheltenham is what he has said. Another one from Jason in the Lake District, who says, the accent topic fascinates me in Carlisle, whereas there's a strong Cumbrian accent, but only 6 miles north in Gretna, they have a Scottish accent. I find it so stark, the difference. You're absolutely right. We're going to talk in just a second more about this accent, says she. In fact, Chris McGovern is standing by. He is chairman of the Campaign for Real Education. This is Edinburgh University lecturers trained on accent bias. Stay with us here on Talk.
And as for your brother saying you're Hyacinth Bouquet, you look more like her than you do sound like her.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Dorothy's been in touch and says, loving your show. I could never send a voice note to your show as I detest my Glasgow accent. The Edinburgh and Highland accent, in my opinion, is far more pleasant. That's Dorothy in East Kilbride. Dorothy, now we want to hear your accent. You've got to send us a voice note. You can't not send us a voice note. Just call in or send us a voice note and count to 10. 0344 499 1000. By the way, just before the break there, that was Tech Up Dave playing a little trick on me about Hyacinth Bouquet. Oh, hold on. My brother has messaged me. Hold on. Here we go. What's he saying? He sent a voice note. Let's see if I can play that one out. We'll try that in the next break. Teresa, very nice comment there, saying she could listen to me all day because of my accent. I appreciate that, Teresa. Kenny in Edinburgh says, hi Cardi P. I told my mates at work I watch Talk, especially you and Kevin O'Sullivan's show, and I was then pointed out that I do love a good blether. I'm Scottish, what do people expect? And then I was nicknamed the Chatty Man, so now I got called Alan Carr. I blame you, Cardi P, and Kevin O'Sullivan for making your show so interesting that I can't stop watching and commentating. Well, I'm happy to take that blame for that, Kenny. Thank you for that very, very nice message. Lots on pensions as well. I'll get to that a little bit later on, but quite a few Quite a few thoughts on accents as well. Graham and Bushy says, you might be talking sense today, but with your strong accent, I haven't a clue, says Graham. James in Wendover in Buckinghamshire says, Alison Hammond and Adrian Childs are two people from Birmingham on TV. Andrew in Salisbury says, British accents are far more accepted now than they ever have been. Foreign accents are almost scorned at in some parts of the world. You're right, Andrew in Salisbury. Let's talk to Chris McGovern now, who's the chairman for the Campaign for Real Education, because this all stems from what Edinburgh University has done, which is that there are lecturers there training people on accent bias. Chris, what do you make of this? Should they be doing this?
No, it's very patronising, actually. And if you are one of that group of young people at Edinburgh University who's been mocked by some public school English person, you're going to probably feel worse if they're running courses to protect you. The best thing Edinburgh University could do is to take a coachload of English public school boys and girls to Glasgow and to introduce them to the Glasgow kiss. That would soon sort them out.
Well, we can't advocate any violence now, but certainly there would be a number of people in Glasgow who wouldn't perhaps be that welcoming. And actually, I've seen people who have been, who have posh English accents, who've perhaps been discriminated against in Northern Ireland, for example. Oh, they're a posh person, what would they know? They're coming down here with their hoity-toity accent. I mean, I had sort of, not discrimination, but a sort of reverse kind of thing when I went. I was very privileged to go to Oxford University and came back and people said, oh, you'll be talking with a posh accent, you'll be telling us all what to do. That didn't happen. But, I mean, it is something we judge people on a lot, isn't it?
It is. It was George Bernard Shaw, the famous playwright, who said it's impossible for an Englishman to open his mouth without making some other Englishman hate or despise him.
Yeah.
We've all, a lot of us have seen My Fair Lady, at least, that great film, Accent is purely superficial. And if children are going into university and they don't realise that accent isn't what defines a person, then they've got a serious lack in their education.
Yeah.
It does. Look, I'm a Brummie, If you want me to, I can turn you into a Birmingham boy if you like. I'm a Brummie, and I was born in inner city Birmingham with an outside toilet. And actually, I feel rather superior about that, because these days, actually, I think more often it's a disadvantage to be privileged. And Peter, often it's the aristocracy, the upper class and the working class get on very well. It's the middle class who are the problem. They will mock people who are below them and so forth. But look, I would say to people, be proud of your accent. I've modified mine, of course, as you have, because I'm doing a lot of public speaking and so forth. But I can revert. When I'm supporting Aston Villa, my team, I revert to my Brummie accent. And I don't mind that our manager, Unai Emery, has got a very strong Spanish accent from the Basque Country. I don't mind that. We should enjoy our accents.
What's your favourite accent?
Funny enough, I like Liverpool, because the Beatles, of course, they were incredibly fashionable. Now they say the Liverpudlian accent isn't really very good, but isn't very posh and all that. Of course, it's not. The whole point, the Liverpool lads, they brought working class culture to the world. I actually quite like the Liverpudlian accent, and of course, I'm a half Irish, by the way. So I have a connection with Ulster too. So I have a father from Ireland, and there's a touch of the Irish in the Liverpudlian Scouse accent.
No, certainly loads of Irish people in Liverpool, and have been for many generations. Is there an accent that kind of grates on you, Chris, in any way?
I think I think it is the posh accent. I've worked with people who sometimes are just too posh, and it's very affected. And so I actually feel slightly repelled by that. People putting on airs and graces I don't like. When I was a head teacher in London, I used to say to the kids, these are primary school kids at this stage of my career, treat people as you want to be treated. That's the golden rule of all religions and of life. And that's what we should do. So ignore the accent. But I do find it great sometimes when people try to bear over you by their posh accents. I find that. And that's why I mentioned, and I'm a bit naughty, the Glasgow kiss.
It is interesting, Chris, as well, that some people are, you talk about people, you mentioned your outside toilet there. There are certainly people who try to emphasise what they would see as the working class roots. Some people perhaps don't have them. Maybe they're a couple of generations ago and they're pretending to be prulier than thou. I wonder, as previously when we had people who wanted to be posher, now perhaps we have people who are downgrading it. Hillary Clinton, of course, was criticised when she was running for president, when she was in certain areas that when she spoke to predominantly African American audiences, that she had what some people called a black scent.
Yeah, that does happen. It happens. I remember David Cameron making the same sort of errors, trying to be
and
one of the
Tony
lads.
Blair as well, with his famous glottal stop. Yeah.
You know, David Cameron's a posh boy. That's okay. Nothing wrong. You know, he wants to be a good posh boy, not a bad posh boy. It's when people are pretending to be something else. Look, people write novels about this. Charles Dickens, Great Expectations, is all about what is a gentleman. And well, a true gentleman is someone who's honest and fair and can see through conceit and so forth. We're interested in the quality of the person and not in this accent. So it's a great story and a great thing to talk about. But we know Edinburgh University, well, they shouldn't really have to be teaching young people about not patronising people.
I think there are probably more important things to teach them about.
There probably are, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you for that. Chris McGovern, chairman of the Campaign for Real Education. My favourite accent, I think, I'm trying to think actually what my favourite accent is. I really. There's a lovely sort of, I think there's a woman I know from Belfast who has just the softest, well, she lives in Belfast now, but she's the softest, loveliest Fermanagh accent. Fermanagh County in Northern Ireland has just a lovely, lovely accent, and it's a really nice accent when it's that sort of lilt, and it's a very soft kind of an accent, which I really like. The one, it's not really the accent in total, it's more a person that I find very annoying, who's the guy in The Apprentice at the moment. I think his name's Jordan, and he sort of has that really kind of boring kind of Dublin accent where he sort of talks a bit like that in a really boring way. And I don't mind Dublin accents. I have loads of friends here from Dublin. In fact, I'm going on holiday in a week's time with 2 friends from Dublin, but he is just that sort of quite nasal, quite boring Dublin accent, which sometimes it can be, but sometimes it's lovely. It depends. Let us know what your thoughts are on all of this. We'll also be talking about the BBC embroiled in controversy once more, accused of Islamist propaganda for calling converts to converts to Islam, I should say, reverts rather than converts. We'll get into this in just a second here on Talk.
Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
This is a Talk exclusive. We've been looking at...
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Because Harry and Meghan have never actually worked in their lives. But fancy picking on a black female, which Harry has just done, given, as you've laid out, all of what's gone before us, accusing the royal family of racism, but of course very cleverly not saying who, so that the thing would fester and fester. So it has come back to bite them. But where we shouldn't be surprised is, don't forget, Harry, this is the individual that years ago was photographed wearing a Nazi uniform.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Betty, who says, Peter, all public and civil service pensions should be market like the rest of the island. They should not have 0% Sorry, that's a bit of a mangled message. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Richard's great point was very, very good. We should not top up pensions. I think that's what Betty is saying there. Dave says, I'm amazed that we, the taxpayer, pay £17 of salary into their pension funds. Most employers pay around 5% and salaries are lower to start with. Ian says there's a pension protection fund for this purpose. We have already paid 17%. Tell them to get stuffed. Paul says MPs should have a private pension that they and the taxpayers pay into until they leave or lose their seats. Well, then they take the private pension with them, and then when the taxpayers stop paying into it. Dave says my pension fund has dropped. Will MPs be making up the shortfall? That's Dave in Lancashire there. And Graham says maybe MPs' pension payments should be based on their past performance, judging how poorly most of them have performed. That will save millions to the taxpayer. We'll talk a lot more about all these issues between now and 1 o'clock. There's 11 minutes of the show left, and I just want to talk briefly about the BBC, because it's been accused of Islamist propaganda for calling Muslim converts reverts. This is people who convert to Islam, and the controversial term was used throughout an article about Eid, the holiday that marks the end of Ramadan. Of course, this was published by the BBC News on Friday. It's used by some to back claims that Muslim converts are merely returning to the faith and that all humans are born into Islam before being corrupted by Christianity, other religions or atheism. It's not used by all Muslims, and it's especially associated with Islamist fundamentalism. Tom Tugendhat, who's a Conservative MP, former Security Minister, said the use of the term was sectarianism and had no place on the BBC. Well, Mohammed Amin is co-chair of the Muslim-Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester. Mohammed, what do you make of this?
Well, good afternoon, Peter.
Good afternoon, hi.
I've only read the BBC News website article in its revised form, and obviously in its revised form it's fine. I've also read through the Telegraph article that you're referring to, and it's pretty clear to me that the original version of the article really didn't meet the high-quality editorial standards that the BBC aspires to, because it used the term revert in a way that most people in this country, certainly all non-Muslims, will simply not understand. And there's no point writing an article which is unclear and confusing. Yeah. And the term convert should have been used. Now, I know that one of the people being interviewed used the term revert herself. She's a Muslim speaking. And in the revised version of the article, that quote is still there. And then there's an explanatory note by the BBC explaining what she meant and why she used the term revert. The revised article is fine. The original article just wasn't good enough.
Do you think this was incompetence, or someone just not understanding, or not looking up the term, or do you think this was a deliberate thing? Because the BBC has been accused of Islamist propaganda. Now, obviously, you can propagandise things without realising you're propagandising it, but do you think this was cock-up or conspiracy?
I don't attribute bad motives to people without clear evidence. Mm-hmm. So my starting point is to believe that this was incompetence. It's quite easy to see how it could happen. If you have a journalist who isn't sufficiently well trained, because all articles are written by human beings,
yep.
Journalists.
And I've made mistakes as a journalist, certainly. But if I heard a phrase like that, if I'd heard revert, it was a new one on me. I saw it online and I thought, I don't know what that means. As a journalist, your job is to be curious. Your job is to find things out. I would have looked it up. I would have had to think about it. I would have maybe referred it to my manager. Is it a phrase you're familiar with? You know about it?
I'm certainly very familiar with the phrase. And of course, the journalist, I don't know the journalist's religion, but her name tells me quite clearly that her parents were Muslims, because she has a name that would be given by Muslim parents to their child.
Right.
So my guess, and it's only a guess, is that she heard the person being interviewed use the term revert. The journalist knows how the term is being used and what it means in that context, and just failed to think that I'm not writing for other Muslims, I'm writing for everybody in the country, and I need to write language that everybody will understand.
Do you agree with Tom Tugendhat when he says calling converts reverts is ideology, not fact?
I'm sorry, you cut out when you asked me your question.
Oh, no, I was just Tom Tugendhat, the Conservative MP, former Security Minister, he said calling converts reverts is ideology, not fact. I wonder if you agree with that.
It's a statement of religious belief. If he wants to call religious belief ideology, I'm not going to argue with him, but it's a statement of Muslim religious belief, but of course that's not a belief that's shared by non-Muslims.
Yeah. Listen, thank you. Very interesting to talk to you. I've learned quite a lot from that interview, and I think we should learn things and we should consider language before we use it. And if you don't understand a phrase, you should certainly have a think about it. So thank you very much indeed to Mohammed Amin there, who is co-chairman of the Muslim Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester, for joining us there today. Paul is in Southampton and wants to talk about free speech. Paul, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Yeah, when you're sort of talking about that woman that was demonstrating outside the abortion clinic, and it was just a point of, when does free speech supersede freedom of choice?
Yeah. What do you think, Paul?
Well, as a man, I think the decision for any woman to go in there is a hard decision. An ex-girlfriend of mine made that decision. I gave my input, and I said, well, the ultimate decision's yours. And I don't think people should have to, when they're walking down the street, having these people trying to harass them for whatever. I mean, a sign is harassment, and I think if
someone holds a sign saying "here to talk," would you argue that's harassment, really?
Well, it's implied that person, if you're there to talk, you're going to try and talk them out of doing what they're doing.
Right.
I mean, you wouldn't stand there if you agreed with what they're doing.
It's a fair point.
You wouldn't have the sign. So obviously, it's an opposition to what they're doing. And I mean, we don't have proper free speech in this country anyway. I don't think anyway. So, but yeah, it is. It's freedom of, like you say, speech to freedom of choice.
Okay.
And it's a decision I'm glad that I don't have to make.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Paul, thank you for your thoughts. Very thoughtful call there from Paul. Appreciate that. Kemi Badenoch has hit back at what David Lammy is saying. This is about the two Labour MPs who were refused entry to Israel. She says Labour MPs should put the UK national interest first rather than campaigning for airports in Kashmir or promoting Hamas propaganda in Parliament. That's what she's accused them of. I'm sure they would deny that. In a post on Twitter, responding to the Foreign Secretary's criticism, Mrs Badenoch said, unlike China, Israel is our ally and a democracy. A good Foreign Secretary would be able to make that distinction. Perhaps Labour MPs could put the UK national interest first and do their jobs instead of campaigning for airports in Kashmir or promoting Hamas propaganda in Parliament. Very strong statement from Kemi Badenoch there. I'm sure this row is not going to go away. Accents is something you all want to talk about today. Let's hear a voice note from Fee.
Hi Peter, Fee from Berkshire here. On the note on accents, I used to work in a job where I spoke to car dealerships all over the UK, and when they would ring into my department, I would always get asked if I was from Bristol. And the worst accent for me to understand at that time was Glaswegian. I could never understand the Glasgow accent because they spoke so fast, and I had to keep asking them to slow down. Great show as always. Cheers.
Thanks, Fee. Thanks to Hilary as well, who sent me a message to say, my most hated accent is anyone trying to emulate the Birmingham accent to a native Brummie. They never get it right. It always grates on us. And Mike in Troon says, I had my Scottish accent beaten out of me at primary school in London. Now I've been in Scotland again for 30 years. I get grief for my home county's accent. I cannot win. Accents are the lifeblood of the UK, but I find it interesting that the likes of Angela Rayner, not a fan of hers by the way, will be mocked for hers by Mike Graham this week, for example. Final call from Michelle in London on accents. Michelle, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say, and in what accent would you like to say it?
Peter.
Hello.
You're looking well. Do you know what? I love it when you laugh. You're such a liar. I love it. I want to tickle you.
Well, it's funny because, Michelle, I have a friend who says I sound like Betty Rubble, you know, from the Flintstones when I laugh.
So cute. It's so cute. Listen, Pete, I've had my accent. My mum and dad spoke. I mean, my mum was from Dublin, but she had an American Dublin accent. And sometimes I used to look at my dad and go, what's she saying? But
right,
I'm a Cockney. But I will say this. I've worked in the best shops in the world, and I've been a manager. Mm-hmm. And as soon as someone comes in and brings down an accent, I get more Cockney, because at the end of the day, when you start this, you're showing that you're a snob. Snobbery's cheap, you know, and you come across as fur coat and no knickers.
Yeah.
It's so wrong. And Peter, you know yourself, you can acquire an accent, but you can't acquire breeding.
It's a very good point, Michelle. We'll leave it on that note. Thank you very much for that. That's Michelle in London there. I want to thank the top team behind the glass for all their accents and indeed their work on the programme. Chris Jacobs has been the producer, Tommy Bateson the assistant producer, Dave Rhodes, Tech Up Dave, the technical operator, going through all those voice notes as well, and thank you to him for doing that. Thanks also to Aaron Hostick and Luke Vincent, the visual producers, Park Birmingham, the video editor, and Dean Spencer, the weekend editor. Thanks also to Katie Simons, who has been doing work experience today, and she has a bright future ahead, no doubt, and thank you to her for coming in. Up next, you're going to be joining up with Talk Sport and the warm-up with Barry Clendenning and Max Rushton. You can follow